meeting to order, please, and thank you. And I know the only one I have heard who definitely will not be here is Representative Kraft. So I welcome you all to the Maine Recovery Council, all the council members as well as the general public, and I certainly hope wherever you are, you're staying cool and hydrated. It's nice to see our communities come together with all the cooling shelters everywhere to make sure that everyone stays healthy and somewhat cool in the weather. So welcome to here. So I'm going to start the agenda with just people going around quickly introducing themselves so people from the general public who are attending know who we are. My name is Pat Kimball. I am a recovery advocate and the current chair for the Maine Recovery Council.
Good afternoon, Benjamin Mann, Deputy Commissioner of Finance at Maine Department of Health and Human Services.
Cassidy Toole, she, her pronouns, Northern Maine Director of Harm Reduction Services at Maine Access Points.
Hello, everybody. My name is Courtney Gary Allen, Organizing Director of VRAP, as well as person with living experience of substance use.
Hello, everyone. Tucker Bass, Summer Intern for the Board Staff.
Thank you.
Hello, Bruce Norton, Maine Reentry Network, person in long-term recovery and a person who lives with mental health challenges.
Paul Vinsel, addiction medicine physician working for Spur Wing as well as Central Maine Medical Center. Representative of the Attorney General's Office.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Todd Brackett. I'm the Sheriff of Lincoln County.
Betsy Fitzgerald, representing the elected subdivisions in Washington County and other counties.
Hello, I'm Mary Coyne. I'm the coordinator for the Recovery Council.
Haley Tranko, I'm not a council member. I work for the AG's office.
My name is Brendan O'Neill. I'm an Assistant Attorney General in the AG's office.
I will ask those on Zoom if they can introduce yourself. Can you start with Joe?
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Joe Everett. I'm the President and CEO of the Opportunity Alliance here in South Portland, and member of the council and chair of the Program Grants Committee.
Thank you. Miles.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Miles Willett. I'm a clinical supervisor.
It's my fault. No, sorry, that was my fault. Now you're fine.
Am I good?
Yeah, you're good.
No problem. I thought the heat had gotten to me. My name is Miles Willett. I'm a clinical supervisor at an outpatient treatment program in Aroostook County. I live in Van Buren, Maine, here representing Aroostook County. I'm also a person with lived experience with opioids. Thank you.
Thank you. Eric?
Yes, my name is Eric Swam. Excuse me, I'm the Deputy Police Chief for the Sanford, Maine Police Department. I represent the litigating subdivision.
And Liz?
Hello there, my name is Liz Blackwell-Moore. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm the Director for Public Health of Cumberland County Public Health Department. And I am chairing the ad hoc prevention work group.
Thank you. I think we got everything, everybody. Good job. Thank you very much. So I'm just going to go quickly through what the process of the agenda will be. I first want to say that what is not on the agenda is the council had asked that we have presentations. And as you see from your handouts, Mary has put together a list of requests that council members have had in regard to freedom. After speaking with Mary, and I meet with Mary for about an hour a week, we decided that we really needed to set some priorities, and that is with the LOI and the grant and the scoring. And as soon as we feel, Mary feels at a point where she's comfortable and not focusing totally on that, we will go to the list. And you all have a copy of that list, and we can add to that list, and we will start scheduling people. But we really thought the priority should be at where we are in getting these funds distributed to those in need. So that is why that is not on the agenda, but we will get to it. So we will have the minutes. We will have a report from the Maine Recovery Council. We'll have an update on contracts with Brendan. We'll have reports from the Finance Committee and the Program Grants Committee, a discussion on the the RFP process and where we are, and then look for agenda items for next time. Is there anything that you want to add to that or questions about the agenda?
Is there anything that we need to do before the governor's summit, or is that all?
I will send you stuff on the governor's summit for feedback, but I don't have that ready yet for people to see. Mostly the governor's summit will be a panel discussion, will be the responsibility of the council, where we'll just sort of take open questions from people who attend the workshop. But I will send you a copy of that PowerPoint when we have it, before it goes final, to be able to proofread it and know what it is.
Perfect, thank you.
You're welcome. All right, nothing to add. We'll go through the minute. We will go through the agenda, and that is the minutes of our last meeting. I believe you all got a copy of those.
Madam Chair, I would move the minutes as written.
Thank you. It's been moved. Seconded?
Second.
I second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion on the minutes? If not, can you call a roll, Helen, please?
Liz Blackwell-Moore,
Yes.
Todd Brackett,
Yes.
Lydia Crafts, Joe Everett,
Yes.
Betsy Fitzgerald,
Yes.
Courtney Gary Allen,
Yes.
Pat Kimball,
Yes.
Ben Mann,
Yes.
Bruce Nodden,
Yes.
Miles Willett,
Yes.
Eric Small,
Yes.
Gordon Smith, yeah, Tina Becker, Chassie Toole,
Yes.
Paul Vincel.
Yes.
Motion carries.
All right, motion carries. Thank you very much. All right, next item on the agenda is the Maine Recovery Council Coordinators, Mary's report.
My report this afternoon is going to be pretty brief. Most of the discussion will be, as usual, on the Program and Grants Committee report. But I want to follow up on Pat's note about the educational sessions. So this list is from the emails that went around a couple months ago. If there are any additional sessions that you'd like to see added, you can let me know now, or as you think of them, just feel free to email me. And again, we'll get those added. I imagine that once the grant and LOI process are more or less complete, that we'll be able to focus on inviting people to attend. So this list, again, is what we have so far. And it would also be helpful if you do have new organizations or people you'd like to invite. If you could just give a brief overview of the topic you'd like them to discuss, that will help with any outreach. Otherwise, I think, again, most of my report will be in the presentation that we'll get to shortly. We had 2 organizations join the Program and Grants Committee earlier this month. VHAF and Barry Dunn, who oversees Kennebeck's ARPA funds and 1 other counties. They joined us to provide an overview of sort of best practices with the letter of intent and then our grant scoring and evaluation process. Those 2 presentations you have in front of you. And that's about it for now.
All right, thank you. Oh, Courtney?
Thank you, Pat. Super quick, Mary. Since we had the presentations on grant processes and grant committee, would it be feasible and the will of the full council to remove the 2 grant processes requests on this pending list of educational sessions, which is, we have listed Maine Community Foundation and the United Way? Is that fine with everybody else?
Yeah, just be redundant at this point.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, I just want to add a thing before my mind forgets. In your emails today, some of you got an email from Health News and the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health and Shatterproof asking for some information from the council. If you review that, will you please, we'll have just one response, so don't respond to it individually, but any response you have, please filter through Mary, and we will respond as a council, not as individuals. If I'm reading it correct, if you read it, go over it, and if you have a particular thing you want, but it's just asking state information on how much money we've dispersed and so forth. So it only makes sense that we we submit the response as a council. Courtney?
Thanks, Pat, sorry. I didn't get that email, so that sounds like a great idea, that one person responds. But it does raise my question about, is the council members who wants to get the emails from the info website address going to be receiving them at some point?
Yeah. Mary was waiting for responses, I think, from people who were interested in receiving the emails, and then she was gonna let me know who wants to get them, because I'm sure there's some people who don't care to receive every email we get.
And thank you for that reminder. I'll send you that list and we can try to set it up as an automated system. I don't know.
I think I'll be able to set it up.
Okay.
Yeah, we had it automated at one point. I don't know what happened.
It was 7 IT people ago in our office, but I'm going to do my best.
I don't even know where this organization got the list. Your email list on here is Courtney Allen at augustamaine.gov.
Oh, well, I haven't checked that email today, so.
And it's not the whole council, and it's not the whole council.
Yeah, they
that got
said
it.
it's like 7 people.
Yeah, so again, when you see it, if you look at it, we'll respond as a group, but if everyone's interested, we'll make sure that you get it.
Yeah, I'll send it.
But it'll just get confusing if all of us send a response, because they're looking for a state answer.
So I just asked Haley to forward it to everybody,
Yes.
just so that.
Just so you can also, yes, it's half people together.
If you have comments on it, just do it, but we will respond as a group.
Could you forward it to my real email?
And Pat, sorry.
Mary, will you be giving us any update today on response to our letter of intent?
Yes. And I also, not to put Liz on the spot, but Liz, if you want to give a quick overview of the first prevention group meeting, you're welcome to do so. They met last week for the first time.
Sure, if that is helpful for folks. We had the first meeting. You can watch the video if you'd like. I think it was posted. We had all the members, all 10 members were there. Folks gave an introduction, shared how they, their current work and past work in prevention. We did a little bit of work on, I just shared with them some of the, some basic information on the Maine Recovery Council, kind of what work we've done so far, things we funded so far, and just sort of gave them the lay of the land of the Recovery Council in general. We did a little work on what our process would be, and then there's I did a little short presentation on kind of public health or on prevention approaches, and then folks shared what approaches they have seen working in their community very briefly. So we have an outline for the 5 meetings. I think it's on our website, on the AG's website, of what those meetings will be. The next one is the needs assessment meeting, or it's more like an inventory meeting. We're going to get a feedback on an inventory of what's being funded for prevention from the well, it's actually through PCG. They're the evaluator for the New England ETTC, so they did some work on that. And then members of the work group will provide some little short presentations on the things they see as gaps in prevention within the communities that they serve. So that one's in person, but you also, honestly, you could also watch it on video. Any questions anyone has about that?
The PowerPoint was very well put together, Liz. Thank you very much. It was very informative. Thank you.
Thanks.
I got a chance to look, so it was great. All right, Mary, we'll continue when you get to the grants and programs. Thank you. Contract updates, which is always our favorite subject.
On Thursday of last week or the week before, I was out of the office last week. Thursday the week before, I emailed the draft of the Piscataquis County Recovery Center contract to the members of the Finance Committee. That version of the contract has been, reviewed internally in my office, and I was now then in a position to share it with the Finance Committee and ask for their feedback by Friday of last week. I received a couple of comments, some comments from Ben that I think are, technical, and I'm able to make adjustments in the contract to accommodate that. And a comment from Courtney. And I don't think I received comments from any other members of the Finance Committee, unless I think you had a comment, but I think it was not substantial.
Correct.
So 2 points. One is if you sent a comment and I haven't mentioned your name, please follow up with me so that I can make sure that I find it. Otherwise, I'm going to try to finalize the contract either tonight, tomorrow, and send it out either tomorrow or Monday, and start talking with the folks in Piscataqua County. I did send them a draft of the contract at the same time I sent it to the Finance Committee so that they could start thinking about it and we could start those conversations more informed. But the timeline right now is, once I incorporate any necessary changes in the contract, either tomorrow or Monday, we'll start those conversations and try to get it finalized in my office. I've had conversations internally about, that, once it gets, finalized, everyone's going to be available to take the necessary steps. So I think we're poised to take the final steps there.
I did submit a comment.
Oh, you did, that's right.
That I think you incorporated in the contract. And I think I just want to acknowledge for the public record that I've been in continual touch with the sellers, the seller of the property. Really haven't interacted all that much with the purchasers. And, we had to ask the seller to delay the closing a couple times. And I think we're exceedingly fortunate that he was not only willing to do it, but has been very gracious. Dr. Stabbert is a psychologist who really purchased this church property in the hopes that something like this would be done with it, and that certainly helped. But we couldn't, on our first contract, be more fortunate to have parties on both sides that I really think that, Brendan's done a terrific job. The first contract's obviously going to take longer than the 100th. But we've been really, they've been really working with us. Of course, they would have liked to have been in this summer, had a grand opening in July, but they've been very, very patient. I just wanted to acknowledge that on the record.
The meeting we had with them to go over the contract, I was fortunate enough to be able to sit in with Mary on that, and I can't tell. They are just so anxious and so conscientious about making sure that they live by that contract. They had numerous questions asked to make sure what we were asking them was in their capability. And if they thought something wasn't, they would say, I don't think we can promise that. We talk about, again, I can't say enough, they're very anxious to get that started. They've quit their jobs, they're ready to roll. They just need the funds. They are ready, and hopefully that opening will come this summer up in Piscataqua County. It would have been nice if we would have been part of the Whoopie Pie Festival this weekend, but it's not. So we'll go as you please. But they are a great group and very anxious to get moving. Ben.
I'd like to follow up good, positive announcements with technical details, but they are, I think, a newly formed organization, right? So they're gonna need to fill out a vendor form to actually get paid before they encumber the contract. If we haven't told them that, it would be good so they can get familiar with the form, so it just doesn't happen all sequentially.
Yep, yeah,
fantastic.
Yes.
And that in the direct deposit form.
Yep, fantastic. Who are you guys?
Yes. Courtney submitted a comment. I don't know if you want to.
Yeah, I'll just briefly. So my comment was under the services part of the contract, there are like broad services that this contract requires them to provide, which are all wonderful, great services, such as host sober activities, events in the community to participants in recovery, provide recovery support meetings, individuals experiencing problems with substance use disorder, etc. The question I have, and I think maybe it's more of a broader question than just this contract, but a question for the council broadly, is that I thought there should be more like trackable deliverables. So if we're asking them to host recovery support meetings, should we be saying they need to host 2 recovery support meetings a week? Or they need to send out 100 postcards or something like that, something that can be more easily tracked as a way to ensure outcomes, I guess. I don't know. It's not something that I'm like overly attached to. It's just something that I thought of as a way to ensure like we're getting outcomes that we can track, I guess.
I have a handful of perspectives, at least from my point of view, about why I drafted it the way I did, with it that way. The first is, I basically used a state contract, so that, to the extent that the performance deliverables are written that way, that I just use that. The council, obviously, this is your contract, you can make it more specific, either on this contract or other contracts. You can make things more specific if you wish. You guys have done a lot of this, I haven't. So the question I raised was, if we make things that specific, do we run the risk of them failing because they can't, reach X number of people or whatever? And maybe there's a middle ground there. The third perspective is, when I look at the reporting requirements, they're going to need to, on a regular basis, file both performance reports that are pretty open-ended. The state performance report was simply, the number of people served. We've added a couple of things to that because of the way the statute's written and the way the MOU is written, but they're generally quite broad. The other reporting that they would have to submit regularly is financial reporting, which says, how much money did you get? What did you spend it on? And I suspect that what did you spend it on will lead to a lot of the, are you using it for what you're supposed to be using it for? And then linked to part of the reason that regular reporting comes in is so that the council, through the coordinator, can say, hey guys, your reporting suggests that you're not spending the money on things that you're supposed to be spending it on. What's up with that? And maybe there needs to be adjustments or pauses on payments. The contract has that authority built into it as sort of a check and balance. So this is going to be an issue, I think, that's going to come up for almost every contract, as you all figure out what you want people to do and how specific you want to be about it. But those are just general perspectives.
Yeah, and the only thing I'll add to that and open it to the council is that I guess I don't know how to gauge success when you're that broad on a contract. Like, is hosting 1 meeting a week and reaching 2 people success? I don't know. And it's, again, I don't want to hold up this contract, like the contract needs to get out. But it is something I think that the council needs to kind of think about and grapple with as we build out more contracts. Gordon?
Yeah, my reaction to that is that they should absolutely report their, how many people they're serving, how many meetings they're having, all their activities, and there's room in the contract to do that, but not to mandate a level of participation at this point in time. Partly because it's Piscataquis County. There's 17,000 residents, I think, in Piscataquis County, spread across an enormous piece of the state. And this will be the most rural recovery center. So we wouldn't even have a clue, in my opinion, as to, well, what should that number be. And so we really worked hard as a council, I think, to give them every chance for success. Gave them money in additional to the purchase price to get started. And, you know, I think it's, you know, it's, our contract is what, 2 years? Yeah, 2 years. We'll be able to, somebody will look at it in 2 years and see whether we think that we have gotten our money's worth. But I think it'd be a mistake to give them a numerical target that's mandated. What if they don't achieve? Are we gonna take back the money? I mean, I want to give them every chance for success. And then we, as Pat says, they're so dedicated and so excited that I think in that rural part of the state, let's see what they can do for 2 years and get all the data, but not mandate, you know, a number of meetings or a number of people. And I also, frankly, have seen some, this will be our 21st or 22nd Recovery Community Center in the state. I've been to every one of them, I believe, multiple times. And, you know, we have certain goals, of course, associated with those centers, but I don't want them to be just playing to the numbers. And so I've said probably, as usual, way more than I should have, but that's my thinking is that I was also shared the contract, which I appreciated, not being on the finance committee, and made the one suggestion that I made, and I think we're ready to go.
Thank you.
I see a comment from Miles.
Okay, I can't read.
I wonder if Miles can just.
Miles, can you say what you said? I can't read it.
So I'll read it just for purposes, but I think it was answered. So I was just throwing out there, I was wondering if we were asking them, not a mandated how many, but like how many people they're reaching, like when people show up to these meetings, events, programs, groups, if they were documenting that, just so we knew how many people we were reaching to see, you know, I know we don't really have a number to gauge it off of like what's successful or not, but at least to see, you know, how many people we're reaching versus how much money we're putting out there. That was my question, and it may be simple and that may be obvious, but I was just curious.
So Miles, a potential answer to the question is that the contract, as part of the reporting, asks them to report on the number of unique individuals served under the contract during the reporting period. It doesn't ask for any deeper detail than that, but the contract does include, you know, flexibility for the council to ask for additional information or, you know, documents, you know, if the council wants to follow up on the reporting. So that's the data. Otherwise, it says, you know, provide a description for the, you know, reporting period of each of the ways in which the funds have been targeted to the approved uses. That's essentially it.
And they do, and it does require they be open 32 hours a week. So they can't just be open one day a week and serve a minor. It does say they have to be open at least 32 hours a week.
The other thing, part of the reason why it's written this way is because I've heard from the council, from various members, that there's an interest in simplifying or keeping reporting simpler for especially smaller startup organizations. There's a balance there, obviously, that you will need to consider between that, you know, burden that you're putting on the grantees versus, you know, good governance and making sure the money is properly spent and doing what you want it to do.
May I just add one quick thought? It seems to me there's like a core group of questions that get asked of people when they apply for grants. One of them is how many people are you served? One of them is how many meetings, like how much of a service do you provide? So how many meetings per week? How many peer recovery support people are trained and operating there? There seems like there's 4 or 5 questions that one of the things we're doing is we are funding projects that we hope to help them build their capacity to then be sustainable in other ways. And so part of it feels like part of our job is to support them to have the tools and the numbers in order to be able to then go and find funds. That doesn't seem like an unreasonable request of information for them, but also then helps them go apply for other funding beyond ours, because we won't fund them forever and we want them to be sustainable. And I feel like that's part of our job. And so I would advocate for a couple other questions that are maybe part of questions that come from what other recovery community centers have to answer when they go to apply for state funds. It maybe if it's half those questions, that would be a suggestion that I have.
So thank you, Liz. The contracts were copied from the other peer recovery centers. And so when the contracts were made, it was sort of the goal was that this center wouldn't be asked more than any other center would be asked, particularly where they're a startup. And so these are the questions and the requirements of the other 20 some odd peer recovery centers within the state. And so adding any more to that would be making them do more work than anybody else.
Let me just clarify. I base this contract on a sample that
Yes.
Gordon had provided to me. I have not investigated, what all of the other centers in the state are having to report, but this was in that sample contract.
Just point of clarity, is it the center's contracts that get $50,000 a year, or is it the center contracts that get like $300,000 a year?
Gordon,
or are they the same contracts?
Gordon,
No, the deliverables are a little bit different in those two sets of contracts that are in Michael Freisinger's jurisdiction. My recollection is that the template we used for this would have been more consistent with the $50,000 independent so-called contracts, because, most of those are in rural areas like Lincoln and Millinocket and Rumford, and so that was the template I think that we could.
And how much are we giving them in operating a year? Not including the building.
377. That 377,000.
So it's about
minus building.
It's 40,000 per quarter,
Yeah.
so 120 a year.
So it's about 175 and capital costs, and then 40 a quarter.
Okay, so that's more than $50,000.
Correct.
And less than two,
And less than 300.
The council has broad discretion, I think, and defer to Brendan on this, but to amend the contract at any time we see fit. So I think we don't need everything to be final right now, although we want obviously to collect information that we will want to see. We could also include something in that section of deliverables saying that like any changes to the performance reporting form that we send them could include additional quantification of the services that they're providing or something, just so we're managing expectations. We could do that without that language, but it might be nice to just give them a heads up that we might ask for more information over time from them if we want to drill down deeper in certain areas.
I think being upfront, including that,
Yeah.
is preferred.
Yeah, we certainly can do that. In that way, it won't hold up the contract. So we can wait and see what happens. If that's the pleasure of the council, we can move forward with the contract.
And we're also, one change that one simplification I'm going to do is instead of, so I'm going to have the contract require that the financial reporting form be the same one that DHHS makes available to its grantees. And the other thing, I'm going to include language in the contract to say, here are the performance indicators that we need on financial performance. And over to, the council, to the extent the council puts a form together, we're going to require that in the future. But in the short term, we're going to keep it relatively flexible.
Do we need a motion to accept this contract?
So what was the question?
Do we need a motion to accept this contract?
I don't think so, because I think the council has already voted to get the money out the door. And I think that gives me enough authority to, and we've worked together, collectively pretty well. So I think that gives me enough authority to go out and negotiate a contract.
All right, any further discussion on the contract?
The only thing I'll say is that this is, as Pat indicated, meant to be, every contract after this will ideally be simpler and we'll build on this form. I'll be working, Mary's been helping me with priorities about which ones are next. And ideally in the future, as we engage, in those contracts, I'll be asking the finance committee and the council to weigh in on the deliverables, the financial piece and the reporting, just to keep things simple and try to do that as streamlined as possible.
Another note about contracting, Brendan, if I could jump in. The SSPs have requested allocation letters for their $75,000. We have a draft of that ready. Brendan is still in the process of reviewing it. I don't think we need a council vote on it, but I just wanted to let everyone know that that's in process. And we've had some input from Chastity on the language as well.
I don't actually know what that means.
I learned-
What is a, I mean, I have heard quite a bit about allocation.
They want a letter.
Yes, but what's the significance about giving them allocation letter? What does that mean?
So that way, like for us, we needed it ahead of time as we're doing our budget for the next fiscal year, just so it could be figured in there to know what's coming, part of the auditor, that he wants it again.
Sure.
It's like a receipt.
Like a
receipt.
You can't plan for money that hasn't officially been told you're getting.
Rather than doing on a handshake, which
Not anymore, Gordon, not anymore.
Just for broader context too, GHA just uses allocation letters from time to time. Typically when we are not timely on a contracts take a lot more time to encumber. I feel the sparks around the room. But it is it's a non-binding agreement technically, but at least it is something that's official and formal and signed, and basically commits, it says the department or this organization is making a formal commitment to actually provide these funds as we are working through the details for the encumbrance of a contract.
And it makes finance people and boards happy when you're making budgets. Any other questions about contracts or allocation letters?
I guess I have one contract question. Is the drug-free workplace language all in there? Because I hate it. And if we don't need to have it, I don't think we should include it.
I second that.
It's not in there.
Okay, good.
At least I didn't see it, because I remember that, looking at it and saying, why is
What about tobacco
that was
free?
mostly block grant requirements, and so it was pages long of just, yeah, I don't remember seeing it, and I've read the contract twice, I don't think it's in there.
Is there any criminal legal language in there?
Say it again?
Is there any
That's usually in the
exclusion of
drug-free.
criminal, like people
Yeah.
with criminal
There is
history?
language in that in there. Yes,
Sorry to open a can of worms, but can we talk about that?
yeah, we talked, I'll show you where it is.
I have a contract through TOA that requires people to not have child protective histories, which excludes me as the executive director of working on the grant, which seems problematic to say the least.
Makes it a lot more high.
You know where it is, I know that it's in there.
Do you want it in the background check section?
Yeah.
Do we have to have the background check part?
I mean,
It is under motor vehicle, your
Is it child
insurance requires.
I mean, do you guys want to discuss whether you want your contracts to require background checks?
So this says that you agree to conduct background checks to all employees, temporary staff, persons connected or hired, consultants, volunteers, students, and other persons who may provide services under this contract. The results of each background check will be made available to the Maine Recovery Center upon request of the council. The cost of performing that will go with the responsible party. Performing background check, it includes Bureau of Motor Vehicles, Sex Offender Registry, and Maine State Bureau of Investigation. If services to be provided under the contract include services to minor children, then the background check will include the Department of Children and Family Services regarding substantiated findings of abuse or neglect of a child. If services will be provided under the contract are to be performed by a person who is professionally licensed, then the background check will include information on the appropriate licensing. They shall not hire or retain any capacity, any person who may directly provide services to participants under the contract if the person has a record of any criminal conviction, child abuse, neglect, any criminal conviction, class A, B, or C.
Yeah, that's the part of the contract that excludes me as the executive director of the organization for working on the grant that I have to deal with youth. So I have to put like a block between me and young people, and I've been in recovery for almost 10 years.
So I'm going to ask the question of Gordon. I'm assuming this language is in every contract every other peer center has.
Yes.
It's template statement.
OPH, yeah.
Because I know when we did the barn, it was under the barn.
Yeah, I'm making an assumption because Bruce might be more likely to know or Ben. And it's not only that, I mean, that's standard contract. This isn't something that Brendan came up with uniquely to this contract. This is just the templated standard state contract. Now, we don't necessarily, in every instance, have to use the state contract language. So, I mean, I think it's a legitimate issue for us to discuss.
The other part of this is that there's also an appeals process. So you could appeal that decision. And the folks that we've assisted in appealing the decision they've all been overturned.
And who does that appeal go? Who handles those appeals?
Yeah, I don't remember.
I think it's.
But there is an appeal process and it's worked. We had some folks that could not do direct peer support for folks, and they had kind of the experience that Courtney had. They've been in recovery for a very long time, and it was kind of a sad story because this person was working for one agency, was hired by us, and they gave their 2-week notice, and then we were told that we couldn't hire that person for direct peer service, and
I did know about the appeals process. I'm not doing it on principle because I don't think that I need to go explain myself to the state again. So it's like my own personal thing. I don't think that I should have to appeal after this amount of time. So I just don't. And I've created a block between me and the youth on principle, but I would really appreciate if we could at least take out the last sentence of that contract that says you can't hire anyone.
I'd like to take it out completely.
I find that
We don't have to
problematic too.
The danger in taking that out legally is, again, you want to be able to know, how do I say this so there's also the protection of that. You want the organization to make sure that they know their employees. And so that's a piece. And you don't, with insurances and other pieces that play in here, I don't know what the requirement is.
Well, I think a middle ground would be require the background check.
Yeah.
And then leave to the grantee the decision as to whether they can hire you.
Yeah.
That's what I said, Gordon. Just take out that last sentence that says you can't.
Yeah, and that's why, I mean, it's just, and Chastity has advised, well, take out the whole thing. I think a better middle ground would be take out that last sentence or develop a sentence that makes clear that the actual hiring decision is placed on the grantee, because then you can tell, is it a drug-related offense? Is the person in recovery? How long have they been in recovery? I mean, because they do, I would say, it's not like we're running a daycare facility, but they do have recovery coaches come in, and people run support groups in very vulnerable
And they need to know.
very vulnerable situation. So again, I'm not a clinical person, I'm just a lawyer, but I think they should know what the background is, but we should trust them to make the decision as to whether there's a role in that organization for that individual.
Joe?
Thanks. It's kind of hard to hear, but I just want to say that TOA has been fighting this battle for about 15 years. This feels very old. And I would hope the council can be really forward thinking in managing this so that we don't limit people. We do have recovery coaches that we've struggled. Even hiring peers 10 years ago was a beast because of backgrounds. So and I'm not catching all the conversation, but I hope that we can be a little bit different than some of the other requirements that we have with other contracts.
Yeah, I think, Joe, I think you're right. I thank Courtney for bringing it up, that we can change the wording and so that we're more inclusive. I mean, there's this old thing in the CCS license. I don't even know if it's still there, but it says you can never supervise a former client. So in the halfway houses, if we had a program director that had been there for many years and somebody goes through school and gets their LADC, but if they were a former client, they're under that program director, we couldn't hire them as a peer. And we asked licensing to make an exception, and we got a letter back that says, what part of never don't you understand? And so, again, it stops people from, looking into, they're out there, they're making a difference, they deserve to be hired. And I think this compromise where you say the background check is there, but yet it's up to the center to hire that. And then it protects them from knowing what's out there and be able to protect themselves, but also gives them some leeway. I think it's a good compromise.
Thank you all. I really appreciate it. It's something that has very much bothered me about the contract that I had to sign. And I think this is one more example of how discrimination against people with lived experience ends up in our policies and practices, and it's a big step for mankind to be deleting this, so thank you.
I will tell you that, this is how old I am, the original substance abuse contracts never had that language in it. And when they blended mental health and substance abuse, they put it in the contracts. With the Maine Association of Substance Abuse Providers, with their standing there screaming, saying, you can't do this to us. But the old original contracts, way too many years ago, and with substance abuse, did not have that language in it.
So I just want to get some clarity about what the consensus is. There's highlighted on the screen, and folks on Zoom, there's a provision on the screen. If you can't see it, please let us know. There are three, so essentially the way the provision works is the first part of the provision is conduct background checks. The second part, which is highlighted here, is after conducting background checks, the grantee, shall not hire or retain in any capacity, basically three categories of employee or people. The first is regarding criminal convictions. That's the first sentence that's highlighted. The second sentence, which is in the middle of the next column, refers to shall not hire or retain anybody or directly provide services to a client who is a minor child if that person has a record of substantial abuse or neglect of the child. And then the last sentence is the grantee shall not, hire or retain anybody if there's an issue with the licensing board. So I just want to clarify, are we proposing taking out all three of those? Are we proposing taking out not all three, but some?
I think my proposal was the first two, criminal legal background as well as child protective background. I mean, you need to have a license if you're gonna do a licensable profession.
Should you leave in number 3, any criminal conviction resulting from a sexual act, contact, touching, or solicitation in connection with any victim?
Are you asking me that question?
Yeah, sorry. I don't mean to put you
I
on
mean,
the
I think
spot.
I have-
I'm asking everyone, but you're.
I think I have a visceral reaction to that because of my past experience in my life, but I don't think that my visceral reaction should be put into policy, if that makes sense. So I think that we should remove it all.
Oh, except that, the last piece on the licensing.
The licensing needs to say, because you need a license if you're gonna be a.
Yeah, I mean, that almost goes out without saying, because if they have to have a license, they'd be practicing without a license.
Correct.
So that's just current law, but there's nothing wrong with leaving it in there. And then from the highlighted language to the last sentence that starts, recovery wellness institute initiative shall not hire or retain a person performing a service under the do you need a motion on this?
Can you, I'm sorry, just repeat?
Yeah, well, I think that the consensus is right, yeah, that's perfect. Thank you,
Right there.
Haley. That was, yeah, I think the general consensus may be to remove the highlighted language, leaving the last sentence about licensing, and leaving the language regarding the obligation to do a background check. And I'm just asking whether you need a motion to do that, or.
Well, first I'd like to hear from Eric.
Eric has his hand up, and then we'll decide on the motion. Eric?
Oh, thank you. I don't know where my raise the hand thing went on my Zoom. It's apparently gone on my screen, but I'm just sitting here thinking about this a little bit. Is there any way to have I'm just thinking it in the police world, as far as if a police officer wants to be hired and has one of these things on his record, we have a review committee and can get a waiver and still be hired. So is there any waiver type process if anybody's been convicted of a class A, B, or C crime that some body could say that that person's okay? Does that make any sense?
It does. So I think Bruce said, if I'm not mistaken, that there is a way to appeal it, but it's a process.
I think that I agree with Courtney. Like, I don't think people with lived experience should have the stigma attached to committing some of these crimes. But maybe some type of board, if you committed a class A crime, last year, that's very different than 10 years ago. I don't really know what time to put on that, but if we could, maybe the person does go through that process.
So I hear the process, but here's my question. Who's going to do that?
That's what I don't know. That's what I'm asking. Who does, like we have, the Board of Trustees.
With us, so we would have to do it, and I don't know about you, but I'm not.
Well, that could be another subcommittee of the board. I mean, in my I'm on the Board of Trustees for the Academy. We have a subcommittee for that hears all the complaints and decides these waivers. I mean, I know it's more work, but it does prevent, in our case, police officers that have done some bad things from being police officers. So.
I just want to remind you that in peer recovery centers, they have lots of volunteers. This is not just one or two people that wander through the door. Probably 95% of their volunteers and the people that we have would have to go under an appeal process. It's mostly people with lived experience, and I'm not trying to place judgment on them. I'm just saying that that's the makeup of peer recovery centers. It's a lot of work.
Question.
Yeah, but what if somebody's in that crowd that has committed a child abuse situation within a year or two? I mean, I don't know. That's risky.
So at some point in time, for me, and then I'll take Paul's question. For me, it's up to the center. So if we review and we do background checks, say I'm the center director, I do background check and I have concerns, it's up to me to say, we'd love to have you volunteer here, but right now we think you're putting, the program at risk, or we're willing to take that risk and hire you and bring you on. I think that we have to be cautious that we're not micromanaging the centers, but that's just me. And I'm gonna let Paul go.
Couple points. We are not interviewing police officers. We are interviewing people who are peers, people who are going to work with people with substance use. By definition, people who are going to do the best work probably have lived experience. In my experience in treating people, I like to work with people that have lived experience. And I love that we take out the shaded part, and if you want to put in is the decision of whether to hire someone after the background check is up to the individual's center.
So if somebody did child exploitation a year ago, they in a center working, I mean, that's risky for all
I
the
don't
people.
think that's for us to decide.
Yeah, it's not for us to decide,
It's not for us
Eric.
to decide.
I'm not even gonna know it. It's the
But is
person
it is it up to us to put something in place where we could prevent that from happening? I guess is the question. I just don't want to see that happen. I'm not saying that we have to police the centers. I'm just saying like,
But
could
we
we
will be policing the centers. If you put that in place, we will be policing the centers.
Correct. I want to take Todd's question.
So my question is for Brendan, I guess, or any of the attorneys in the room, but, you know, what liability do we have, right? So if we don't take any liability, you know, if Center X hires whomever they want, then I would be okay with this language being removed. If we have some liability as a council, where we permit this behavior, and somebody makes a poor judgment, and hires somebody who's beat the shit out of their significant other 3 times in the last year and a half, and then lo and behold, they end up getting in a lawsuit because something bad happens at the center, and somebody gets hurt physically by this person. We have a saying, predictable is preventable. I just, as long as we don't have any liability, I would be okay with it. If we have liability as a council, I think the language should stay there, and I like number 2, because number 2 seems to put a time frame on it within the last 2 years. You know what I mean? So I don't know whether we have any liability as a council or not. If we don't, I can't imagine the state would put it in there if they didn't have any liability.
I can't answer that.
I don't have an immediate answer for it, but it's something I'll look at.
I'm along the same lines as the sheriff. That's kind of what I'm getting at. So I would agree with the sheriff on that.
Yeah, I don't want to prevent anybody from doing the work either. I appreciate it, and I appreciate their willingness to do it, and I appreciate that people who are in recovery aren't necessarily the same person today that they were, previously. So, and that's important. I'm all about that, but I'm just worried about liability.
I can tell you from personal experience, I've watched peer recovery centers handle very delicate situations and do it in a very professional way. Nobody wants to protect that center more than they do. They want their center safe. They want everybody to feel safe, whether, particularly people who have been traumatized by violence and by sexual exploitation, I have watched them take it very seriously. They see the background check, they handle it internally, and it works out. Gordon?
A question and a comment, maybe 2 questions now. There's language in the contract, is there not, regarding the nonprofit organization having to have liability insurance? Usually the state contracts have some kind of provision regarding insurance. That was one question. The other question's easier, I think. Well, maybe not, but I hadn't thought about volunteers, and this language is that shall not hire or retain in any capacity any person, Does that, who may directly provide services? So we've got a recovery coach that's doing it as a volunteer. Does that word retain intended to include people who work in a fully volunteer capacity?
It's broad enough that, certainly people could make an argument about it.
Could be made.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, so.
And then I had a comment. I had 2 questions.
Okay, then a comment, because I am going to be specific to time, because we've got some major decisions to make, and I don't want this meeting to get
right. And
too
so before making my comment, I'll just note that, you know, we have to, in my opinion, agree on this language today. You know, I've already asked people to delay the closing 3 times, I'm not gonna do it again. So these are difficult questions that, you know, deserve to be resolved, but, you know, I don't think we have, in this, I'd be concerned if, for instance, we send Brendan out to report to us next meeting on, you know, some of these questions. And finally, I kind of agree with something that Dr. Vincent, I think, said, or Bruce, Norton, that, you know, we can help set an example here. That this is very stigmatizing. The people that we work with, very frequently people in recovery. We know what they've gone through. We don't have to be a part of that. Let the organizations make that decision, and otherwise we just perpetuate a system that really, I think, has been not well served, means people struggling with substance use disorder.
Bruce?
First of all, I want to thank Courtney for bringing it up, because honestly, for our organization, almost everybody has lived experience of incarceration, and you know, I'm often just very quiet about these things, and I kind of just don't say anything because we don't want any additional scrutiny on what we're doing, so you can kind of imagine what that looks like. It is an opportunity for us to do this. The other thing, to do something good as far as toward reducing stigma. The other thing that I want to make sure that we understand too is this is language in all of the OBH contracts that we have, not just for recovery centers. This is for all of our programming, and it's kind of, it trickles down from federal. So I don't know if we're held to any federal guidelines. This is opioid settlement fund, so we probably are not, so let's do it, please.
One step for justice, you guys, one step.
You know, there's nothing wrong with being number one.
And also, to that point, Bruce, you're still gonna have to do it all, right? Because the powers that be still make you do it. So this doesn't actually change anything other than my feelings about this contract.
I'd like to make a motion to accept the contract and remove the lines that are highlighted in that section.
Seconded.
It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion on this?
Who seconded? I got 2 or 3, so.
Gordon was first.
Gordon asserted himself right in there.
wins.
Give Miles one, he keeps trying.
He does. Get in here, Miles. It's that air conditioning in the car that didn't work today, that's why he's not here. All right, if there's no other discussion, I'll ask Haley to take a roll, please.
Discussion.
Oh, okay, sorry, I didn't see a hand.
Just clarity, did we say that we know there's no liability or undetermined?
It's undetermined, we don't know yet.
Thank you.
Can I just bring up that we are required to have liability insurance, and we have to provide that to OBH and any other state contracts.
One other quick clarifying question, is there any other indemnity language in the contract for us?
Just get it all over.
I'll confirm on both of those ones.
I'm sorry, what does that mean?
Hold harmless.
Indemnity means if they do something wrong, they can
indemnify, hold harmless.
And somebody comes after the state, they have to take care of it.
I'm nearly positive that is standard language in all state contracts.
It is.
Just that they cannot, the contract cannot indemnify the state.
Yeah.
All right.
I just want to make sure it's that I've carried it over.
All right, you ready for a roll call? Go for it.
Liz Blackwell Moore?
Yeah.
Sorry, stop sharing so I can see all your wonderful faces. Todd Brackett,
Reluctantly, no.
Lydia Crafts, Joe Everett,
Yes.
Betsy Fitzgerald,
Yes.
Courtney Gary Allen,
Yes.
Pat Kimball,
Yes.
Ben Mann,
I'm going to abstain based on the fact that I signed over 2,000 contracts with this language and committed to looking at this language further.
Bruce Nodden,
Yes.
Miles Willett,
Yes.
Eric Small,
No.
Gordon Smith,
Yes.
Keena Thakkar, Chassie Toole,
I wish it was all of it, but yes.
Paul Vinzel,
Yep.
motion carries with 10.
Motion carries. I thank all of you for your comments, your concerns, and you're willing to listen to all viewpoints, and I thank you for that. All right.
Just a quick follow-up, we'll have a chance to hear back from, eventually, if you're able to find answers to a couple of those questions. I don't want to hold up this process, honestly.
No, we should be able to answer the questions eventually.
Yeah, I mean, it's, for all, this is going to influence all of the contracts, so, it's an issue that, I'll be paying attention to. The indemnity language is in there, and, I will respond on the liability question, as well as the liability insurance question.
The indemnity language is there or isn't there?
It is.
It is, where?
It's in,
I didn't see it.
it's on page 17,
Okay, thank you.
paragraph 12, state health.
Your eyes probably glared over.
Just a clarifying question, when you look at liability, I don't think we've ever had a discussion as to whether this body is protected by the State Tort Claims Act, as a state entity would be. And there are limits to what, as you know, you can't just swoop at that man, you can, but there are statutes that protect the state and the municipality and the counties, and there's limits to some of that protection, but it's really kind of the first line of protection is the State Tort Claims Act. And I don't know.
So if we're not, we need directors and officers insurance?
Well, let's just start with the first question.
Okay.
Could a claim be made that we're protected by the State Tort Claims Act, just like other state bodies? Because, and I guess I would look at like the Maine State Housing Authority or Efficiency Maine, and are they protected by the State Tort Claims Act? And that would be a great question for your summer intern. Or mine, but.
Oh, so
I'm on
you look
Tucker.
forward to.
Don't come on their summer.
All right, well, thank you. We are going to move forward, if that's okay. All right, Ben, Finance Committee.
Great, thank you. So I'll provide a brief readout of the Finance Committee meeting. The current balance, first of all, in our account is $30.5 million. That includes settlement payments received and monthly interest payments. We anticipate receiving about another $5.5 million by the end of the year in settlement, incoming settlements. So that would raise it to $36 million. That $36 million does not count any funding that would go out the door in approved contracts yet. That's just on the revenue side. I think I mentioned last time that because of prepayments and everything, the total amount of funding is lower by about $2 million. So I think in a future council meeting, we will decide how to adjust the out-year budget so that none of the cash flow goes negative. Right now it goes negative in year 7. This isn't a today or next month thing, but we'll do it, I think, sometime this calendar year when we have a little bit more time. I won't go into all the details. We had a lengthy discussion on the contracts, specifically the Scattercliff Recovery Center at the last finance meeting. We also spent, which has been formulated into the current contract. We spent a considerable amount of time talking about additional capacity in the form of another vendor or staffing contract to support the coordinator, Mary. I think we're going to discuss that a little bit more later in the meeting. I think it was helpful. I don't know if it was shared, so somebody else can chime in, but we did create a straw man of roles and responsibilities between what is the responsibility of the council versus the coordinator versus the OAG versus any other capacity or staffing that we bring on, since I think that will become increasingly important to know who is doing what, and so that those expectations are clear. Was that shared out or no, not yet?
It was not.
It was shared with finance.
Yeah.
I think that's it.
That was not included in materials.
So we can share it with everybody
I
else.
think it makes sense to share it with everyone just so that we can get a sense of that and make sure that we're all in agreement of that. We reconfirmed that we thought that indirect costs should be set at 10% or at least up to 10% for that overhead for all applicants. We have another finance committee meeting next week. We'll be discussing a little bit more in terms of the cost for a prospective vendor and additional capacity, but I know that's on the agenda to discuss as well. Questions about finance or budget or things that came up the last finance committee?
Clayton? The 10% cap on indirect is a big decision. And I'm assuming that we could make that decision here because I know very little about indirect, but I know that we have some very credible organizations that charge more than 10%. And so I'm worried about it. That's my point, and I think that I want to be able to know that this council can make a decision on that. I mean, I think it's fine today to go with the assumption that we get these letters of intent in, that 10% is something that the finance committee is comfortable with. But I'm at least articulating a theory that we may need to revisit that in the coming meetings, depending upon what we see, what we hear from other organizations.
Joe, and then Paul.
Yeah, I feel like I'm the pain in the butt indirect guy. I think 10% is very hard when organizations have a federally approved indirect rate, which is higher than 10%. So it's a huge financial loss if a person bid on work at that rate. So I'm with Gordon. I just raise it as sort of it'll be a challenge for organizations.
Thank you, Joe. Paul?
Yeah, as I remember in the committee, we did say that if there was one that was higher, we could decide as the Recovery Council to approve on an individual basis.
Yeah. Courtney and then Gordon?
Sorry, I think I'm like the opposite of my good friend Joe's annoying indirect person, because I feel really strongly about this 10%, thinking about like the contracts such as the youth contract that we're putting out $20,000. I can't remember to how many organizations, but say it's 10 organizations are getting $20,000 at 10% per organization. That's $20,000 in overhead. And then 10% of that also goes to the parent organization, so on and so forth. I'm just like trying to prove a math point here where like money just gets sucked up in overhead, and it makes me very uncomfortable that all that money is going to overhead and not to direct services around the opiate settlement money. I just want to say that out loud.
Gordon and then Paul.
No, I defer to my colleague.
They're all reasonable points. I actually think it's pretty straightforward. I think by the settlement agreement itself, we can't spend more than 15% on administrative overhead. So if we could go above 15%, which is still going to be above some federally approved overhead rates. And even if we went to the max, we couldn't hire basically or do any other administrative work in the council, and I don't think work is going to get done. So I think 10% is like, I don't see many options around this. I mean, we could quibble over 10 or 12 or something, but I think I might be missing something, but that is where I sort of come out here at, which is, I've been saying up to 10%, so I think some agencies won't even, I don't know if there's an overhead rate built into the Scattergood's contract, for example.
No, because I've been treating it all as direct costs.
Yeah.
This question for Ben, does the state have a limit on what it will pay in an indirect rate in a contract?
There's 3 different options. Basically, you can negotiate one with the state, you can have a federally approved one, or the default is 10%.
So in other words, the federally approved rates are something that the state's comfortable paying.
Yes, mainly because that is, it's like a federal code of regulation type stuff, because a lot of the funding that is going out substantially is likely to be federally approved, so there needs to be, it flows down from the feds. But I mean, some of the overhead rates that are approved federally are north of 30%.
No, I know.
What?
The university's rate is very high, I know, for instance. No, my only point, and I think we should, we probably don't need to take an motion, but this is sufficiently complicated. I mean, one of the questions I have is that, well, I really like to know what the TOA's federally approved indirect rates are for organizations that do a lot of the substance use work in the state, so that we have more, I just think we should have more information on what the practices are out there. I would love to have Mary take a look at a dozen other states and their settlements to see what indirect rates they might be approving. And we don't have to make the decision today, obviously, so, but we should commit some time to this in the future, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think it's an excellent thing for the Finance Committee, along with Mary, doing some research on that.
I think the research has been done. I think Ella's distributed, a chart about.
I think just to make the Finance Committee, but we can circulate it.
Yeah. Okay, so let's start with the Finance Committee, sort of looking at that, and then we will bring this back to a future council meeting that will have the larger discussion with everybody. But let's do the background on it first, and then agree to move.
Wait, didn't we do the background?
Well, yeah, but we don't all have the information.
Oh.
She's got it, but we don't all have that information.
Did we provide it to finance already?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought everyone did.
Yeah, and that's part of the conversation
I have no
that
recollection.
brought us to the recommendation of
Yeah.
10%.
And I think, like, some of the other states are providing, are providing no indirect rates. They're saying you can't. Others are providing, there's a range that start from like.
Generally 8 to 12.
Yeah.
But the cap anyways, no matter what, is 15.
In the settlement.
In the settlement, and that
85%
includes
of the
Mary?
money has to be used on abatement.
And that includes Mary's cost?
I don't know, see, this is weird. When I read that, I don't know whether that counts as the money in a whole, so you take 15% of the 10 million, or it's in your contract, if we allot you 50,000, no more than 10 of it or 15 of it can go to admin. I don't really know a clarification on that.
It's all the money total, so.
So it's all the money total.
So the settlements are written on a national basis, and, things aggregate up. And, I think we want to keep it as low as possible.
Okay.
I mean, zero's fine with me.
But we also don't want to exclude organizations either that may be doing some incredible work.
Yeah,
So-
and I think, my recollection is the settlements were written with the concept that the money goes to abatement.
Correct.
But, others have made, I think, the strong point that you can't do the abatement work unless you pay people to do it.
Correct.
So it's a balance.
Correct. So I am going to have this conversation continue with the Finance Committee, and we will sort of move on from here.
I just, so we're just not always in an endless loop. Like we did look at all the information, we came back with a recommendation of 10%. I think we can decide as we get LOIs. I think that'll be informative to actually, I think we have the Finance Committee recommended 10%. I think we did have a discussion about using the federally approved rate. I think there's some issues with that, but I think we sort of have the default of 10% and pending further discussion. Is that fair?
Yeah.
Okay. And informed by what we get from actual applicants.
Yeah, and we'll know better once we see those budgets.
Well, the budgets don't include.
The grant application will probably include a more detailed. The LOI won't include details that would include that in it.
I know you want to move on, but it looks like Colorado's 10%, Florida's 5%, Indiana's 4%, South Carolina, Iowa's 2.5%, Minnesota's 10%, Texas is 12.5%. I don't know if Texas has that. I don't know.
Because it's Texas. Texas is.
Everything's been in Texas.
They're the Lone Star
So
State.
now I'm not fine, we have now moved me down.
What I'll do is send that document out to the full council with the roles and responsibilities document as well.
Yeah,
It's all a little more nuanced than that because each one has a slightly different definition of what administrative or
Correct.
takes.
which may be part of the question that we develop our own, what exactly is that? Okay. All right, any other discussion on this or the finance, as we can move on to grants? All right, thank you very much, Ben, thank you. Grants Committee. Joe, do you want to start off or do you want Mary to move forward? How would you
Well,
like?
I'll talk for about 30 seconds because my good friend Mary and team have been leading the work. So I would just say that the last few months have been very focused on the LOI, the application process with some really excellent guest speakers. So I think, Mary, you've done a great job. So I'll turn it back over to you to sort of talk about where we're at with all those processes.
Thanks, Joe.
One moment.
I got a chance to watch the last one. I couldn't go to the grants committee and I got a chance to watch it. Those last two presentations were great.
They
Yeah,
were
they were really good.
Yeah. Okay. I have a slide deck that we can present.
Oh, do you?
Yes.
I think I only got 2 spreadsheets and a Word document from you. That's all I got in the email.
It was a separate email. Let me see what I want to.
Oh, cool.
Oh, yeah, 1209.
I got it.
All right, so as Haley is pulling this up, the presentation is an overview of the letter of intent evaluation process and what the recommendations have been from the Program and Grants Committee. This recommendation is very similar to the draft that was included in the materials today, recommended LOI evaluation process. That takes into account, again, the feedback from prior program and grant discussions, as well as some of the best practices that were shared from both MIHAP and Very Done. So that's where this is all coming from, and a hope for today, with the full council's attention, is to vote on this evaluation process. There are a couple points of discussion that we need to have in order to do so, and so I will pause to open that up for discussion. Brendan also has some input. It would be, I think, most helpful if I can go through each slide, and then we'll open it up for any feedback or questions. As it usually goes, I think some of the questions that you have will be answered later on, and if that's the case, I'll just let you know. But because this is broken up into specific steps, it will help for us to discuss that as we go. Had a fun time with the PowerPoint, so you can tell. So the process overview, there's sort of 3 big categories here. You know, what are we evaluating? Who's doing the evaluating? And then how are we scoring? I also want to draw attention now to the evaluation process and evaluation review. That is in reference to the initial scoring that will happen individually for each letter of intent. The scoring process is the aggregation of those scores and then a process around which we make decisions for how to move forward. And I've tried to differentiate in the presentation, but if at any point it gets confusing, let me know.
Wait, can you say it one more time?
That the evaluation review is around, that's the process for which the Program and Grants Committee or the council will individually review letter of intent submissions. Yes, yep. And then the scoring is what do we do once we have everybody's evaluation templates? How do we make cutoffs? What does that process look like? And how do we actually invite people for full process?
Thank you.
Yeah. As I mentioned, this recommendation includes feedback from program and grants, and then the 2 presentations last week. This evaluation process is, again, about the letter of intent. It doesn't touch on the grant scoring, and it also doesn't get too detailed into the scoring process for the LOI. The committee hasn't quite discussed that yet. That's part of the agenda for Tuesday. So I've got a couple recommendations if anyone's interested at the end. And then also in this document you have in front of you, the last page includes a couple process recommendations there. So for what is being evaluated, the evaluation criteria we're looking at in 3 different groups. And again, I've tried to label things to help clarify sort of general categories of what the criteria is touching upon. So those 3 big categories are eligibility, the program criteria, and then the third would be a recommendation criteria. And that's a little bit different because it's a recommendation score. And that was developed from MEHAF's recommendations to us, where they do an evaluation process, and then they have an additional score called the recommendation score. That's a separate metric that can be used, again, when the scoring of LOIs actually happens, to differentiate between applications and help us kind of assess which ones are most likely to succeed moving forward. Before I go into the eligibility and program criteria, are there any questions from the council right now? So the eligibility criteria, and again, that's eligibility pretty broadly. It also includes organization information and whatnot. There are 4 different elements that the Program and Grants Committee has discussed, and those are numbered as you can see. We discussed similar criteria about 2 meetings ago, and there was some input from everybody that I've adapted and is reflected here. So the first one being a pretty basic eligibility question, does your organization meet our eligibility requirements as outlined in the LOI? The evaluation method for how we'll look at that criteria would be a question within the LOI. We ask explicitly, please identify which organization this is. And the recommendation here is to move forward with a binary evaluation scale of yes or no. So if an organization does select one of the types of organizations that we've determined are eligible, yes, and if not, no, and no points to be awarded. So it's a similar scale for these 4 elements, as I mentioned. The second being the proposed project, does it align with one of our approved use strategies? If the application indicates so, that would make them eligible to receive a 1. And this is really looking at, was one approved use selected that feels, what's the word I'm looking for, that feels like it's applicable. So I also want this question, to help us differentiate if somebody selects 10 or more, let's say, approved uses, but it doesn't feel like at least one of them truly aligns, that we have the opportunity here to make note of that. And the third criteria, the proposed project, does it align with the priority strategies? If it does, a point is granted, and if not, they don't get any points. And then the 4th one, does this provide services to 1 or more counties in Maine? If at least 1 county is selected, or they check statewide, then they would be awarded a 1. I believe this question is not required. So if it's not answered, then that would indicate that it does not provide services in Maine.
Great.
Yeah.
So so the applicant would need to have 4 points in the eligibility criteria to move on?
That would be something we would discuss with the scoring. Yeah.
Do you do this?
No, this is what each of you will do when you're evaluating the LOIs. This will be the criteria that we're all looking at.
Okay. Second question. For number 1, aren't all organizations eligible? I mean, we didn't exclude anyone.
We didn't. We do have an other option. And if somebody puts something that doesn't feel, again, eligible, we have that discretion. you know, this is really, I can think of potentially a situation where somebody's looking for personal use of the funds or wants to, you know.
They could be a coalition versus an organization
or just a person.
Or just a person.
Yeah, move forward.
But aren't individuals eligible? That would just fall under their use of the money? Like being an individual doesn't make you a non-eligible entity, does it?
No, it's listed.
Yeah.
So I guess my point was, I think they would all get awarded. There's no one that's not eligible.
You could have somebody that applied that didn't read the MOU and doesn't meet the criteria. So if I was an individual.
But we said that everyone's eligible as an organizational level.
They
I
would
mean,
be
it's not a
non-eligible
big
at a
deal.
different level than the first question.
So for example, if an individual submits an LOI to pay themselves for something related to opioid use disorder, the individual would be eligible whether or not the payment to them is allowed as approved use would be a later question.
Right, that's the point.
Similarly, an individual could submit an LOI to provide transportation for people who need treatment for opioid use disorder. Again, the individual would be eligible whether the approved use is appropriate would be a later question. Is that right?
Yeah, it starts with as an eligible organization, then goes into as an ineligible use.
Are we comfortable keeping this in, or would we like to take it out, the evaluation?
It's a gimme.
Yeah.
It's like, here's your,
That's
here's your free point.
Everyone gets a ball.
Everyone's eligible, so everyone gets one.
It's like your name
You get a
counts.
trophy, and you get a trophy, and you get a trophy.
Everybody gets a trophy. You get at least 1 point.
And that's kind of the essence of, I think, most of these criteria are to be eligible to apply or to apply for this funding, you should probably check these boxes. So
That's why I think maybe you should do this. This is like very like
I can.
clean, like it's like yes, no, A, B, did you do the thing?
Part of my thinking is, as one person, it's just a lot of time.
Oh,
And
yeah,
if
that
you're all
makes sense.
reviewing them
Never mind.
anyway, you could please say yes or no.
Never mind.
I can do it though, if that's what the council would like.
I think it just makes it easier when we talk about scoring, that everyone just scores an application.
So the program criteria, this gets a little bit more into the sort of nitty-gritty of the evaluation process. These were discussed by the Program and Grants Committee and really capture more of the essence of the submission, and if it seems like it meets most of what the council is looking for funding. So the first one of these, question, or number 5, does this project include leadership and decision-making by communities of focus and meaningfully engage those communities throughout the scope of the project? We have a couple questions within the LOI, questions 10 and 11, that ask about the populations the project provides services to, as well as the makeup of the board or senior leadership. I'd also imagine the project narrative would help support evaluating this criteria, and that can also be included. For this question specifically, I'm going to turn it over to Brendan because he has a couple notes about the use of question 10 and 11 in our evaluation.
So a number of you have raised the question of whether it's permissible to ask about targeted populations that have historically been underserved. And the question has resonated with me in a number of ways. I've been reviewing case law. I've been talking to colleagues who do this work across other agencies. And with these two questions and going forward, including with applications themselves, I'm very likely to make a recommendation to the council that you can ask about whether somebody has prior lived experience or some variation of that phrase, but asking about racial makeup, asking about other sort of protected classes is probably something we can't and shouldn't be reviewing. There are other sort of neutral ways to get at the question of whether the funds are being targeted at underserved populations. But trying to, in other words, and I've started working on an alternative way that would be less likely to be challenged, to ask the question of how does an entity serve, target, find populations that are historically underserved in Maine that would be more likely to survive in the current legal landscape. I can go into that a little bit further, but I'm conducting the work. I'm pretty close to a recommendation. I'm talking to others, but I've talked with Mary about this. Technologically, there's a way to isolate some of the answers in the LOI, and if the review comes out that way, we can isolate the answers so that you don't see them and they don't factor into your review.
Thank you.
So in other words, that's likely to change, the wording a little more, or at least your recommendation.
It's likely to change, right.
So that being said, it might change if we want to look at number 5 as part of our criteria. Again, the project narrative could support the evaluation of this, but would not probably be as straightforward as, again, if we could incorporate those 2 questions. So I'm not sure if the council has any feedback right now about that particular criteria.
I think it's important to keep in there, and also feels like something that is becoming very standard in a lot of grant making stuff. And if we want to prioritize people with lived experience, removing that out or not considering it doesn't seem helpful.
Can we keep that part? It's just that we show protected classes here.
Yeah, I think it's fine to get information about whether people want to answer the question about whether they have lived experience or whether they're working with people with lived experience. The riskier part legally is asking about, are you serving?
But all the things are, protected classes because substance use falls as a protected class. So wouldn't everything be a protected class under that rationale?
Primarily we're looking at issues about race, issues about, historic discrimination. And when we're operating, certainly grant making does this, especially with nonprofits, but when you're operating as the state has a higher standard it has to follow under the equal protection clause, and that's the analysis that I'm looking at. I think, based on my analysis so far, I think that whether somebody has lived experience is, not as problematic as asking about whether an organization has, or serves, Black populations.
So point of clarity. So are you saying that we could assign points to lived experience, but we'd have to exclude out in some magical system way all of the other options that we put underneath all of that?
That's my instinct right now, yes. And under the application, there's very likely a better way to get this, which are, having a narrative that says something along the lines of describe the ways in which you or your work targets historically underserved populations, specifically
For the grant time.
for the grant application.
Okay, so for this time though, we could narrow it to lived or living experience. Can we leave in reentry?
I'm sorry?
Can we leave in incarceration, experience of incarceration?
I personally think that's a facially race-neutral way to look at historically underserved populations.
Could you say that in English?
Probably, the answer is probably.
Okay, thanks. I haven't gone to law school yet. Give me a little time here.
I'm more than pleased to send you some language that we have from BJA grants that we just applied for that ask for that specific information about historically underserved populations.
I'm not,
Bureau of Justice Assistance.
Okay. The one thing I want to clarify that money that comes from the feds, it can be treated different. Like the U.S. government has different rules that around this issue than the states do. So it could be that, but I would like to see that.
Yeah, I'll forward that.
Yeah.
I'll forward both of the grants to you. You'll find a grant.
In general, to the extent that the council stays away from issues about, race or gender or things like that, unless you, to the extent there's other ways that don't target a person's identity to look at, how to address gaps in serving, Maine's populations, that would be a better way to go about it.
It's just that it doesn't just say historically underserved populations, it lays out what those historically underserved populations are, and they include the BIPOC community and others.
I'd love to see.
Okay.
Is that something that in the actual, when we put the grant out, we can figure out a way to ask that question of grantees when the grant comes out? At this point, the letter of intents are already out. We really didn't, and how it's worded, we really didn't ask the question, but we can clarify that because we haven't developed the questions for the grant yet. Put something like that once we get the wording in legally that we know we can, to be able to explore that further, to make sure that it's including underserved populations.
So for the purpose of the LOI and the evaluation process, can we narrow to this question to just include lived or living experience of substance use and lived or living experience of incarceration?
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
And in that case, I would be supportive of that. And also, if it's okay with the council, as a majority, I think we've had a lot of discussions about how question 10 and question 11 are very different questions, and they were crafted purposely to be very different questions. Can they be evaluated as different questions? Either as a full point, I would even be willing to give, negotiate down to half a point. But I don't think that they should be evaluated together because they're different questions.
The only thing is that we have a bunch of folks that have already answered these questions.
Correct. She can narrow it in the back.
So technologically, we can isolate those questions so you don't see the answers. But whether or not, I think we have to figure out whether we can isolate parts of the answer.
I'm sorry to go on and on, but the other part of it is that we have certain parts of the state of Maine that have larger BIPOC communities and other communities, and then others that do not. And that's my only thing is I would hate to penalize those folks in any way.
So a permissible way to go about this would be to say, look at where where the gaps are in the state. If the gaps are in a geographic location, you can target the funds at that geographic location. That's a good example of a permissible way to go about it.
Liz's hand is raised.
I'm sorry.
Liz's hand is up.
Oh, I don't see it. Oh, Liz, sorry.
Hi, that's okay. I'll just say that targeted geographic region will not necessarily ensure that you're doing culturally relevant services to a group of underserved people. Like that is a really different thing. And so I think I would love for us to keep exploring this for our next round of funding, because there are a lot of people who aren't being served, and they're not being served because need additional resources or to ensure you're creating programming that's culturally relevant. And so I think I apply for grants all the time that have a really specific request, including state grants that ask for us to do underserved populations with very clear definitions of who those are. So I would love for us to keep exploring this because it seems like there's a way to do it without having people who are saying whether or not they themselves are of a particular race and ethnicity, but saying that you're doing culturally relevant work that will focus on populations that have been underserved.
So,
Liz, I had sort of visualized the kind of narrative approach of trying to solicit information from a grantee about how they would go about, reaching out to, an underserved population. And I think that's a good place to where that, we can, frame that question in a way to get at the information you're looking for. Also, to the extent you have an example of that kind of a state grant, I'd love to see a copy of it.
Sounds good.
So I'm just going to sort of refocus us back to, again, these are great conversations to have as we develop questions and for the grant, but if we could stick with this letter of intent and this evaluation, the scoring sheet, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
So to recap, what I will do for this question, or for this criteria, is I will only include responses that have been selected as incarcerated populations or populations with SUD or OUG, is that correct? And we'll still move forward with this as program criteria?
Yes.
Okay. The sixth one looks at if the project responds to a community need or an opportunity with a community-defined or community-based solution. We would use the pillars and strategy as well as the narrative to help evaluate this criteria. This was again developed from discussions with program and grant, and then we have also asked a very similar question in their evaluation process. Number 7, looking at if the project feels feasible based on the budget that's included, or excuse me, the total amount of funding that's requested, project narrative. Does this feel like something that can actually be achieved? And does it also provide some form of evidence-based or evidence-informed support? And then the last criteria, will the proposed project assist in combating the opioid epidemic across Maine? This really combines the entire LOI for the reviewer to determine if they believe it meets this criteria. Are there any discussions about 6, 7, or 8?
I think it might just be
the system.
Liz, is your hand up or did you not? Thank you.
Lowered.
That's okay, thank you, just want to make sure. Oh, Ben and then Gordon.
I don't know if we need to get into it now, for questions 10 and 11, if it's an individual applying, would it just be applicable to the individual themselves? Or would the question be irrelevant?
Say that again?
I think it would be irrelevant. Well, question 11, if an individual is providing services to formerly incarcerated, that would be relevant. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's both. It's going to get complicated on evaluating a proposal if someone is just proposing to start a new business, essentially. That's going to be pretty complicated to score and evaluating whether or not we're going to provide funding for that, as opposed to transportation is one thing I guess, there's degrees of stuff. It's just going to get complicated with individuals applying and using the scoring criteria in that context, I think. I guess it's just an observation as we're going through this. My head's just going through with organizations and vendors that are going to be applying for this, but I don't think there's a one-for-one alignment with individuals in every case.
And remember that the letter of intent isn't to accept them, it's really to
Yeah,
invite
exactly.
them to apply for grant, which you'll get more detail and to be able to determine, and they'll be able to, again, this really is, are they eligible to apply for the grant? So remember.
But it's also a weeding out process too.
Correct,
right?
correct. But you don't want, again, it's more of a general piece. Be careful about some of the questions you ask, or some of the questions you may have will be answered in a grant. Your overall is this application appropriate to come through?
Sorry, I think it's also just like, I think we have said it so many times on that call is like, we're gonna learn things in this first process. And like, one of the things I may have learned is that individuals applying for this money seems to be complicated. And maybe we don't wanna do that next time, I don't know.
Correct.
Just quick, I think that's probably accurate, and I would, I think we're gonna need to determine if individuals are applying to provide services to others, that's different than an individual applying to use funding for themselves too, and those are two very different things, but something that I have thought about since the beginning, maybe we have like a separate pool for individuals that we set aside X dollars a year for individual applicants, and it's a totally different process than this, with but I'm getting us off track.
Okay. Thank you.
So I love question 6, 7, 8, that's great. I don't feel like my question around 10 and 11 being the same evaluation was ever answered. Like there was no discussion, so I don't know how it ended. So my question was, question 10 and 11 were purposely crafted in a way that they're very different questions. One is about if the organization is led or has leadership within it of people with lived or living experience. And then question 11 was about who the organization is serving, which I think we compromised and thought that that was a great way to make sure we were capturing both things. But when we talked about it as different things. And I don't think that they should be evaluated together as one thing, if that makes sense.
Sorry, another clarifying question is, how could you answer question 11 and still align to the approved uses if am I missing something?
No, you're not.
Okay.
That's my fundamental concern here. I think you just hit it on the head, was like everyone's serving.
Yes.
Everyone is getting a point here, and the intention was to make sure that people with lived or living experience had an opportunity to be centered in this.
So what you're asking is, go ahead.
I thought question 11 in my head was like, if we're providing to multiply disadvantaged communities, they might score higher than just doing transportation or something. If we were intentionally going to provide services for a particular population, Portland or Lewiston or wherever in the state, that then they might score higher, but it by default it gets a point, right? Like I hear your point, I hear what the point that you're making, but.
So you're asking that we separate the questions and score them separately?
Yes, ma'am. Oh.
Question 5, which has those 3 things as the evaluation, you can have 4 points for question 5, is that correct? So if they hit like great on 10 and great on 11 and great on 30, they get 4 points. And if they hit great on 10 but not so great on 11, they get 2 or something like that. I mean, I don't think you have to put those as separate categories, you just score them based on the total of those 3 questions.
Okay.
I think Courtney's saying that she wants them to score differently because they're assessing different dynamics of the individuals or the service provider.
That's what I'm saying. Ben said it better.
Can I just ask, on question 11, if we take out this, population descriptions and just have it be people with lived experience, Wouldn't that be everybody?
Yes.
That's what they say. Yeah, yeah. I mean, so should we eliminate question
That works too.
rather than score it differently?
That works too.
Is, although I did hear folks say both lived experience and prior incarceration. So maybe there's remains some targeting.
Chances are those are gonna overlap.
Correct.
Chances are. I don't mean to be negative, I'm sorry. I mean, it's a reality, right? I mean,
Correct. Okay, so the pleasure of the group is to eliminate or to separate?
Separate.
so you talked about question 5.5. You know, or adding question 9, having 9, you know,
So my
5 through 9.
original ask was to separate them and give them both a question, a response.
Correct.
I think Brendan makes a valid point that could be easier to just remove question 11, because now that we've narrowed it to just lived or living experience, it's literally the whole pool. You have to be providing services to folks who use drugs to be eligible for this money, right? So now question 11 actually is kind of new.
I just clarify, and that may be true only to the extent we're not dealing with prevention, right?
Right, because treatment prevention, I mean, yes.
Yeah, but prevention's not part of
Prevention's
this.
not in here right now, so you're right.
We're not, yeah, it's not a part of
Harm
it.
reduction, yeah.
Harm reduction,
harm reduction.
recovery, treatment.
For this round of the LOI, I'd be fine just going question time.
Okay, great. What that said.
So what are we doing?
And keeping 5 as is.
Yes, just remove question 11. Question 11 is no longer relevant to the scoring process.
If anybody has any objections on that, speak up now, otherwise we're gonna move forward. All right, thank you. Go, Mary.
So this is the recommendation criteria that I think we have a lot of space to define as we feel most appropriate. Again, this will be a separate metric. So we'll have the eligibility and the program criteria score, which I believe is a total of 20 possible points you'll receive. And then also a recommendation score, which can also be up to 4 points. And this will help us capture which applications we believe demonstrate an ability to exceed, to most successfully utilize the funds. And I also, believe there's an opportunity here where we could emphasize, or we could award additional points to any projects that are especially innovative, that check all of our boxes. This is to provide a score for applications that you all as individual reviewers really would like to see invited to submit a full grant application. And the evaluation method for this is something I think would be helpful for all of us to discuss. It can also just be the full application and be left to the discretion of each reviewer. Again, there will be 3 evaluators for each letter of intent. So that will be taken into consideration when the scoring process occurs. But in terms of an evaluation method, I have not determined anything concrete. If it's the will of the council, we can also take out the recommendation score and just move forward with what we have. Yes.
The recommendation score is kind of an overall idea of the whole thing.
Yeah. As an evaluator, you look at it and you'd say 1 through 4.
Okay.
As I looked at the letter of intent as a whole, I would say absolutely, or I would say no.
Is there a limit on how many I can say absolutely to?
No, there's no limit. You can
Absolutely
say,
to all of them.
you can say definitely, or you could say definitely not on any amount you want. Or
Well, that
anything
could
in
be
between.
problematic, because what if I literally just love them all?
Well, that's great.
Just give, we're 1 to 3 people.
Okay,
LOI.
Again, sometimes
Love.
we always throw at the highest score, so be careful.
What? You throw out the highest score?
Yeah, that's the same thing.
No, we haven't discussed it, but you can. In some grants that I have reviewed, They throw out high and they throw out low, and they average the middle.
And that's a discussion we'll have at program and grants.
That is another discussion that we have. Yeah, it happens all the time.
That's weird.
Yeah, they throw out high, they throw out low. But again, there's multiple people scoring one grant. So I may give one grant a high score, Chastity may give another score. So again, it's not that you're throwing that out altogether, you're just throwing out my scores.
Oh, I thought you meant you threw out, like, if it all averaged to.
No.
That's what I was thinking.
A 9.9.
No, you're individual.
We did the highest rated project.
That would be, why would we show the
Okay,
best
Liz?
rated project? That doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, no, Liz, I can't read it.
This is what? I've never heard of that.
I also thought that you were saying the highest scores total. I was like, I've never heard of someone not giving it to the group that got the highest score. Sorry.
No, it's as a whole. The United Way does it all the time.
Yeah. My highest score, each individual highest
Right,
score.
when there's a panel
When there's
of
a-
ratings, you can throw out, because you're trying to get rid of the outliers, you want to, like, it's basically trying to get to the consensus of the group, and there might be one high outlier, and everyone else said no. So you throw out one of the no's and that really high score, and you get the no.
That's weird.
That's how they score figure skating, doesn't it?
What's that?
How they score figure skating in there.
I was just gonna say that, it's like diving.
We should do a statistics class in council, it'll be fun.
Oh, I hated statistics. All right, come on, rally back here. Mary, take the floor. Take control, Mary.
If the council's comfortable with it, we'll move forward with the recommendation criteria definition as defined. If you'd like to make any changes, please speak up now.
I just have one question. You mentioned innovation.
Yes, as something that could be considered when you're providing your recommendation score. If it's incredibly innovative, you think it'll be successful, something to consider.
The only question I have is, seeing as how the approved uses, say that things need to be evidence-based or evidence-informed, how, is it possible for somebody to be both evidence-based and innovative?
You can be promising practice, which isn't necessarily evidence-based.
Should we include that in the criteria?
Why couldn't, I think the answer would be yes. Why couldn't you have an innovative approach to an evidence-based practice?
You could.
Yes, you could. You could also, I guess, have something be evidence-based that nobody's doing.
Correct.
And just a follow-up question, if I could, Mary. Did you envision that as, how does that fit in 1 through 4? Would innovation be like a bonus? Like, so say I was the evaluator, I looked at this and I said, okay, this definitely fits, plus it's innovative, so instead of a 4, it's a 5?
We could do that. I was thinking that would be 4.
Where does innovation, or you just kind of take innovation in your consideration on 1 through 4?
Yes,
All right.
I understand.
Is that
I
what
think
you
each
meant?
council
Okay.
member decides how important
No, that's
the
fine,
innovation
yeah, okay, that
is.
makes sense.
Fantastic.
All right.
So this just is an overview of the evaluation scale as was listed on the previous slides. Again, total evaluation score would be 20 points, and then the recommendation score would be an additional 4 points that would be awarded. So now we get into, we discussed what we were evaluating, and now we're talking about who's doing the evaluating. So in order to do that, we get to talk about conflict of interest. We have printed the bylaws for all of you in the meeting materials. Wanted to point out just a couple of things here. So the conflict of interest, those are both actual conflicts and any perceived conflicts, what may appear as one. Something to keep in mind as we talk about this. And then the Programs and Grant Committee has discussed, and correct me if I'm wrong, but that the conflict of interest really is around an organization basis. So if you have a conflict with a specific organization, it pulls you out of the review process for looking at obviously that organization or any competing LOI submissions, but it does not make you ineligible to be a reviewer and score, let's say, applications from a different pillar.
It's really interesting, Mary, because I'm thinking of where I will have a conflict of interest, and if I'm also unable to review letters of intent from competing things, that could really limit what I can review. And I think that's gonna be true with a lot of us.
So, and correct me if I'm wrong, so the way MEHAP does it is if you say that you have a conflict of interest, it means you can't score. Say for instance, I work for, I'll just use that Wellspring, and Wellspring applies for it. I can't score Wellspring. Doesn't mean I can't score other treatment programs within that category, but it means that I can't score the one I have a direct conflict with. At least that's how MEHAP does it. I don't know if that fits how ours is, but at that grants meeting, that's what they were explaining, is that you couldn't do your own, but it doesn't preclude you from doing other treatment programs. But again, that's just how they do it.
Can I just mention that, you may recall that our conflict of interest policy is, based on, referring to MEHAP's conflict of interest policy quite a lot. We can do things differently, but their language, heavily informed the council's conflict of interest policy.
But so we have said that people would be, like if you have a conflict of interest, you'll review LOIs that are under a different pillar. Pat is saying you just shouldn't review LOIs that you have the direct conflict of interest with, right? And that you should still be able to review other LOIs in that pillar.
That's what MEHAP is saying that they do, that just because I work for a treatment center, my center applied, they're saying that they would allow you to do it, but you couldn't score your own companies or someone you were on the board with, or your spouse or your partner was on that board. But that's what MEHAP is saying. Bruce and then Jesse.
And Liz?
I thought that we came to the conclusion, and I think Gordon summed it up at the end, toward the end of that grants meeting, that the perception of conflict of interest, if you were scoring other folks within that same pillar, then you could run into, some perception that maybe you might score somebody a little bit lower or somebody a little bit, because you're in that same pillar, you have an application within that same pillar. So I thought we came to the agreement that we were not going to be eligible to score within that pillar if we had an application within that pillar.
So that's a question that we can decide that will be our standard. But again, we could do it the other way because that does not conflict with our conflict of interest. If we decide that that's what we do. The thing that I want to caution you at is, and we're going to have this larger question is, in the state of Maine, the degree of separation is really hard. And so we're going to have to look at, how many people we have to score what grants. And so we'll make those decisions as we move forward. Certainly if somebody's uncomfortable with it, we can have that conversation. But again, we can do it either way, because either way goes within our bylaws for conflict of interest. But again, as a council, we can discuss it and determine which way we want to. But in that, I just want to caution people that when we start counting numbers of who is a conflict of interest, it gets pretty crazy in the state of Maine, because it's very well connected. It's a nice thing about Maine. And at some point in time, we have to trust that people have some honesty. Jesse, Gordon, Courtney.
Liz's hand went up.
Who's?
Do Liz first, hers was
Okay.
up first.
Who did Liz? Liz?
Oh, sorry, I thought you were pointing at people in the room.
I didn't see you, and they said you were first, so go for it.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you all for looking out for me. I too thought we had a pretty robust conversation about this in grants and grants committee, and I thought, and I don't know if I guess we didn't vote on this. I guess I'll say I hear you that there may be some issues with numbers and we should look at them. I think the perceived conflict of interest is really real, and that we should try as hard as we can to not have there be even a perception of conflict of interest. and that folks who have an organization that's applying for something shouldn't be allowed to be a reviewer in that pillar. And that I think we should do the numbers when the things come in and see what that is, but that would be my recommendation as someone who's, I mean, all the conflict of interest stuff that we have to do for government is really clear that I should not be a reviewer for something in which my organization is applying.
Great. I think it's in Chastity. Gordon, Courtney.
I'm okay now.
Liz pretty much said the whole thing, I think. The only thing I would add is that I do believe that we could reach out for even volunteers with grant-making experience, with scored applications. I've started talking to a few people and had volunteers even almost unsolicited who have no conflicts of interest. And I think our concern that this will end up with too few members of the council being involved is not a significant reason to throw out the notion of the appearance of impropriety and conflict of interest. Imagine if you put in a lot of effort on your application and you found that it was in fact, denied, and that a reviewer is a member of the board or employed by an organization that had a competing application. This isn't even a close call. In my opinion.
And it's important to remember we don't have an appeal process. So it's important because we don't have an appeal process that we go things at a really fair, as much as we can, because we don't have that process. And so we need to be really clear. I just wanted to point it out. Courtney?
I was just wondering if Brendan, as our legal counsel, had any thoughts on this, or if I missed it. I'm sorry, Brendan.
So I think what I'm hearing is that the debate is either if you have a conflict of interest in a pillar, are you therefore excluded from reviewing anything within that pillar, versus if you have a conflict of interest within a pillar, are you prohibited from reviewing the specific application that you have a conflict about? Is that, that's the question. So I'm trying to imagine a scenario where you have a conflict in a pillar, you identify that conflict, and you therefore are prohibited from reviewing it, but you keep reviewing, say there's 5 applications, you're prohibited from reviewing 1, but you can review the other 4, and everybody else who's reviewing under that pillar knows you have that conflict because you've disclosed it. If you low score the other 4, what would be the impact of that? I mean, that would obviously taint the review process, right?
You asked the question and answered it. It's obvious. It's obvious. It's a conflict of interest because you could diminish the grade. You could grade low for all the competing applications, and your application would be benefited by that action.
I mean, I think going back to 7.2, the language is, you should endeavor to avoid both an actual conflict as well as the appearance of a conflict, and you do so through disclosure and abstention. I think I think you do have the authority to make different decisions about this, but I tend to think that a decision where if you have a conflict in a pillar, you don't review other applications in that pillar makes sense.
Okay, great. So let's move on.
Okay, I need to take Todd's question and then we'll move on.
I think I understand, but I just want to clarify. In Liz's comments, she said specifically, if you have an application, you should be scoring that in that same pillar, which makes sense. I use myself as an example. If another sheriff has applied, I haven't applied, but another sheriff has in a particular pillar, that could be an appearance of.
If you didn't apply.
No, I just don't want, if I didn't apply.
Yeah.
I was just unclear on whether it had to be my application or do you see circumstances where the appearance of a conflict, I don't wanna overthink it, and I do want to move on.
I think if, just because you're a sheriff doesn't preclude you. If you had an actual application in,
So like a real example, my organization has submitted 2 LOIs, one under recovery and one under harm reduction. I'm not eligible to serve as a scorer for recovery or harm reduction, though neither of those would actually pay me, but it's my organization to fund staff for my organization. So I would only be eligible as a council member to serve on the treatment. And it would be the same scenario if Gordon was on my board, which he is not. He could not serve under the treatment or recovery. Does that make sense?
Correct.
You know, just a carrot step further, I mean, I think, take Chastity as a harm reduction staff for the Maine access points. If the Maine access points didn't put in an application, but another syringe program did, then she's not disqualified.
Correct.
There's no appearance, you know, of her own organization is, well, just because she's in harm reduction, just because you're a sheriff, doesn't mean, now, again, if it's you are also in a group of 4 sheriffs that we're highlighting as a cooperative entity, the way that you do MOUD treatment in the jails. So again, there might be an occasion where another sheriff does something that they're tangentially involved. But again, I think we said enough about it. I think we can move on.
All right, thank you. So I think we have an understanding of what this group believes their conflict of interest says, and we will honor that.
Could we, like, so that Mary can maybe start to do a analysis of how many of us are gonna be able to serve on what? Could we all report to Mary if we have a conflict, so that maybe you can start a spreadsheet of, who would be where?
I'll get there. You can't report to me, you have to report to the chair in the bylaws. And my request to the council would be, after this meeting, to reach out to Pat and any organizations, any conflicts that you know of right now, to please let her know, and which pillar the organization is applying for. But after we receive all the LOIs, what I will do is send out a list to every member of the council of all the organizations that have applied. And if your husband, wife's partner's organization is there and there could be a potential financial interest for you, you could disclose
Husband,
any.
wife's partner.
Whoever it may be, there is a financial.
I heard slashes.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yes, not comments.
I just want to ask Mary a quick question, because Mary knows the agenda and what she needs. How much time do you need to get through what you need to get through?
Probably about half an hour more than we have. What would be, so let me go through this slide and then I'll get back to that.
Okay, thank you.
Because a big part of this is if we know right now that we need external reviewers, we also need to identify a process for that. And that can be part of the Program and Grants Committee, but we also need to decide sooner rather than later. So here are some reviewer scenarios based on the number of applications we could receive. Right now we have what looks to be about 80 complete applications. If the 9 and 15, the 9 would represent if just the Program and Grants Committee evaluated, and 15 would obviously be if the full council evaluated. I imagine we'll get somewhere in the 100 to 150 range. So we'd be looking at anywhere from 20 to 50 applications per person.
Can we refer to them as,
Excuse me, submissions, thank you.
And is that based on 3?
Yes, yeah.
Each application getting 3, or each submission getting 3 reviewers.
Yeah. I will make the evaluation assignments. You'll all receive a scoring template based off the evaluation criteria that we already discussed. So, and you will only be able to see the LOI submissions that you are evaluating. So you won't be able to read any others at this point in the process. So I just want to make note of that. The exact number of applications you're all reviewing could differ based on what we receive, in terms of your conflict of interest disclosures. Just want to mention that. If right now it's, that the council believes right now that we need external reviewers, we can begin developing that process in the Program and Grants Committee. Or if we would like to wait, we could do that as well. Gordon?
Well, I think That's terrific work, Mary, and you said a couple of important things that we just learned, that we've got 80 completed applications, and that you expect with another 10 days to go, well, 8 days to go, that we could have over 100, between 100 and 150. So that's very important to know. I do think that we don't know until we see the list of organizations. So we wouldn't be able, let's just say that I was an eligible reviewer in any of the pillars, but you're only going to send me X number of applications in one pillar, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you get to make that decision. So I think that, and how many applications would I be likely looking at?
We don't know exactly yet.
Yeah, but let's say let's say there's 100 each. So I could be looking at 30.
If just program grants committee, every member of the program grants is involved. If we pull in additional members from the council, or we open up that evaluation to the full council, you're probably looking at closer to 20.
Because we do assume that no member of the council would be precluded from all of those. I think Courtney has suggested that her organization is in 2 of the pillars, to leave a third pillar. But my only point was going to be there is no reason, there is no downside for not looking for independent, experienced reviewers right now. If we don't need to use them, wonderful. But why wouldn't we? And I think one of the issues is, okay, do we? And my recommendation, yeah, we look for volunteers at this point, see what, if anybody would do it, and then I think it should be an administrative function as to who's eligible to volunteer as an external reviewer, and then we'd only move to paying people as MEHAF now does if we can't find enough volunteers to get through this first process.
So that's a great point. And I'd like to ask the council, does anyone anticipate that they will not be able to score under any pillar? That they will have a conflict of interest under all 3?
Dr. T said she might, because she works for like the biggest health organization in the world.
Joe, will you have?
But it isn't necessarily that you work for them. It's like, I work for Wellspring, but I haven't had any affiliation with Wellspring for 5 years.
She works for them right now.
Yeah,
She works for
them
Maine
now.
Health.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so Dr. CT said maybe, but she doesn't even know because
They were
the
figuring it out.
organization is so big that
The other day.
We won't know.
And remember, like, that will come back to the council, and you can all discuss whether she has an actual.
Yeah. And so the hope is, if the world is in a perfect place, the hope is that the next board meeting, am I correct, Mary, in July is a training session for scoring grants. So if we have people volunteering, that's our hope.
Well, Gordon said there's no downfall, and I guess I just raised one downfall. I think that this is a complicated process already that we've gone through. And I just think that bringing more individuals into it could have some pitfalls that we don't know right now. So I'll just say that.
I don't disagree.
I'd also like to just mention that the full grant application scoring, our needs are going to be different than right now.
Correct.
I would feel more comfortable having that conversation at the grant time and like just plowing through this LOI time.
Great.
You said, what was your estimate of time for evaluating each LOI?
Half an hour.
Is that,
Remember,
Half an hour.
is that just a guess, or like, is
No,
that
that's
based on-
from some pretty lengthy discussions with MEHAF, and that is, what they've seen pretty consistently.
Remember, we limited
myself
the words to
350, I know.
We limited to only 350
It
words.
was hard.
Is the bottom line based on 30 minutes or?
The bottom is 30 to an hour. That's the range. At least, I did more math than I've done in a long time, so that's wrong.
And remember that it's all online, you can do it, you don't have to be in a room with all of us, you're doing it online.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, so that's if you spend half an hour, right, the first one 8 hours versus 15 hours.
Yes.
Oh, I have a logistical question.
applications.
So if the three of us are on treatment, are the three of us getting the same applications?
No, you could.
You could.
You'll get, everyone will get 3 applications to score. And, I'm sorry, everyone will get an undetermined amount of applications to score. Every submission will receive 3 scores.
So you won't review every single submission?
It'll depend how many submissions per filler.
And
But
that's
each application will get 3 people.
3 different people.
But that doesn't mean.
But we won't, so there's 3 of us on the committee of scorers, but we get different applications, so how are 3 people gonna score them?
Because there would be like 5 people. in
Yeah.
treatment.
Oh, okay,
You'd
got
each
it.
get 20, and total, each one of the applications is getting 3 reviewers. Not necessarily 20, but like you don't get 20. Some of the same
Okay, so
ones.
my math in my head was that there are 3 people on each committee, so 3, 6, 9, 12, and we all have to score the same number of applications.
But there'd be 5 people under each pillar. So you'd all
Okay,
get some of the
never
same
mind.
applications, but not all the same.
Got it.
It's like dealing a deck of cards.
I got it, I got it.
Exactly.
I forgot there's only 3 pillars,
Except each
not
card
4,
goes
so
through
the
the
math
map.
was not.
Yeah.
You got,
Todd?
One of
Copy
the,
basis statements.
as a guy who doesn't do this, or doesn't, never evaluated a grant
Yeah.
application, right? I was really intrigued by the presentations that we had at the committee. And one of the things that jumped out at me was the fact that they use independent reviewers.
Yes.
A number, not a, you know what I mean, a portion of it. Right. So my question is, I understand where Courtney's coming from, but in this first step, if we were to use independent reviewers now, or start to look at a few if we need them, would they be involved later, could the same reviewers be used later on as we look at the final applications and the grant? Because if they, I don't know how that works, so if they can, then whether we engage them now or not in this process, we could decide, you know, as the numbers come in. But if we start identifying those now, I think we're gonna be better off. Because I like the idea of having those 3 independent, MEHAP, I think, used the example of 3 independent reviewers, at least in one of the scenarios. I can't remember if it was MEHAP or done, but anyway, I just throw that out because I don't necessarily disagree with Courtney, but in the interest of trying to get these done at the end of the day and get this money out the door, if that's a process that's easily started, I don't know how much anybody can take on at this point. But I just throw that out because I just wasn't sure how the process worked.
Okay.
Could I ask a slightly awkward conversation? Did you include yourself in this board? No, it's just council members.
Yeah. Mary Gansford.
No, I will do an initial review of submissions just to make sure every question's answered, but that's about it.
Yeah. Okay,
You can't
so
score, it's just not, you just have other work to do.
I will be, I could just thought I would. So I'm not a member of council. Yeah. I don't think myself out.
Gordon?
I just think that's a wise decision, both because of the workload and because she's gonna be the one person touching all the applications.
She sees all of them.
Even though she'd obviously be no different than an external evaluator and certainly be a capable reviewer, I just think it's good to separate
Yeah, Mary's job.
membership.
She also has to
from-
interact with everyone who's submitting an LOI when they have questions, so that's like a lot of communication she has, and it just creates like conflict of interest.
So,
And I mean, we're the policy makers in this scenario, and you're the policy implementer, so
So-
that'd be weird.
under this, Mary, do you have enough that you need done on this part of your presentation that we can bring back to grants?
Mary's like, make a decision.
So my timeline, I recognize, I think about this every day, is probably different from yours, and there's a lot of decisions that still need to be made. Ideally, what happens today is we vote on the LOI evaluation process, which was the 8 criteria that we've discussed. We also review this timeline, which says on the 28th, after the submission deadline, the day after an email is sent out to you with all the organization names, you have a week to respond to let us know if there are any additional conflicts. I then have a week to make assignments and do the initial LOI review before our next full council meeting, at which point we would invite an organization, and the Program Grants Committee can discuss this further. We'd invite an organization like we have to come in and give us a scoring training. And at that point, I would recommend that anybody who will be evaluating an LOI is a part of that training. So Todd, if we do have a process for external evaluators, I would not be comfortable with anybody I would not be comfortable with us starting the evaluation review until everybody who is an evaluator has been trained. And that happens during full council.
In the part, the advantage is that everything is taped. So that if someone came in last minute, we would require them to review the tape and be able to get that training, and Mary can sign off. Courtney?
Okay, I would be willing to move closer to volunteer reviewers if I understood the process in which volunteer reviewers would be chosen. Is it like this one, and this one, based on who picks them? How do they get picked? What is the process in which we even like identify who can be picked? I don't know, I'm like spiraling right now.
And that's what makes me concerned with this timeline, that to have a robust process for selection, I mean, our LOIs are due in a week.
Right,
So.
and I mean, this council was appointed by different various people through a process, a public process. And we would be superseding some power of this council to a review committee, which I think is fine, as long as it happens in like everybody is eligible to serve. If you want to serve, a letter goes out, you tell us your name, like, and then you get put into a pool. It's just like, again, it's like another spiraling process thing.
Yeah. So my recommendation is that we do the LOI review with the council. And if it's determined on July 3rd that there are too many conflicts for us to reasonably divide the evaluation reviews, then our July 11th meeting will look different, and it will be around a process for inviting external evaluators.
So what Mary's asking today is, will the council vote not talking about external evaluators, but will the council vote on accepting Mary's recommendation on this evaluation process that she presented today?
I'm happy to motion to approve the evaluation process as edited by the council, which can be reviewed on tape.
Do I hear a second?
I second.
Do I have any further discussion on that? If not, can you call a roll, please?
Sorry, what are we looking at?
The motion.
The motion to accept the evaluation process, excluding the use of external evaluators.
So
That will be discussed at another time.
The motion on the table is that we accept the 8-question review process that was presented to us with the expectation that somebody will review the video and make the edits as recommended. Yep, that's the motion.
I have motion to approve the evaluation process as edited. Is that
Yeah,
no longer the
that's
motion?
That's
Okay.
it.
No, that's exactly what she said.
Sweet.
Can we also add if it will be program grants for council?
We've already voted that it will be programming grants, so if we're gonna change that, I think we have to edit that previous motion.
Okay, can we take the roll?
Yes.
Can I have a little discussion?
Yes. on the-
Sorry,
No.
but, would it be easier, Mary, if we had the whole council review these? That way people would have less to do. I'm not on the Programs and Grants Committee, but I'm really excited about reviewing these LOIs, and I'd really like to be involved.
I believe that that's her recommendation, is that everybody on the council be part of the evaluation. I believe that's Mary's recommendation that you're voting on right now.
I just think we
So
need to
no, we're not.
approve because you voted to have the Program and Grants Committee only do it, so I think that motion needs to be.
Okay,
So
so
we have another
Courtney,
pattern.
can you review your thing to say that we changed our minds, however, what?
Do we have to have the person make the original motion?
I'm going to
No.
revoke my motion. Withdraw my motion
Your second has to be withdrawn as well.
I'll revoke I would withdraw my second.
Can we get a training on motions?
Everyone go home and read Robert's rules.
All I know is that you need to get this vote, because I need.
Yep, okay. The new motion is to approve the review,
The
evaluation review process as edited in previous conversations, as well as amend a previous motion by the grants committee to allow for the full council to review letters of intent.
So,
Was the previous motion by the grants committee or by the
I think it was
council?
a full
I think it was
council.
by the council.
By the full council.
as a guy who spent, at least, I can't have countless hours in the last 20 years at 18 different town meetings, I'm far from an expert on Robert's rules, but don't all we need is a motion to revisit, and then we have to approve that, because it's already been voted on. No, the previous, I'm told that it was, that we previously voted to allow the grants committee to evaluate these, that's it, that vote's already been taken.
All right, well, just the motion that we just had was never voted on.
No, yes.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
So really all you need is a motion to
We
revisit.
all set. So we have a motion, do we have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? Please call the roll.
1 second. Okay, motion to approve the evaluation process as edited, as well as amend a previous motion directing the program and grants committee to evaluate the LOIs so that the full council can evaluate.
Correct.
Wonderful. Liz Blackwell Moore,
Yes.
Todd Brackett,
Yes.
Lydia Crafts, Joe Everett. I couldn't hear you.
Or a yes.
Betsy Fitzgerald,
Yes.
Courtney Gary Allen,
Yes.
Pat Kimball,
Yes.
Ben Mann,
Yes.
Bruce Nodden. Oh, snuck out. Miles Willett,
Yes.
Eric Small.
Yeah.
Yes.
Gordon Smith,
Yes.
Keena Thackara, Chastity Toole,
Yes.
Paul Vincel.
Yes.
That carries with 12.
Motion carries. Thank you very much. And I apologize, but this next item is very important. I apologize that we don't probably have a long time to discuss it, but it's an important issue that we'd like to move forward. So I'm asking that you allow Mary to do her quick presentation and then ask questions so she can get through the information that she needs to, so we can make an important vote.
First, thank you for voting on that evaluation process. It's great to work pretty well. Something that, has really been stressed to me the past couple of weeks is the LOI is in a really great place. We now have an evaluation process, but the actual grant is still not fully developed. And so we can move this process along as fast as we want, because we don't have a grant and a full grant process developed. We'll be at a standstill once again. So in looking at our upcoming meetings and a bit of our schedule over the next couple of months, I think it's feasible for us to begin, again, reviewing the LOIs mid-July. Based on the amount of time we feel we need to review those, my hope would be that by the August council meeting, we could at least begin scoring the LOIs. But between now and August, and also maybe even September, it would be really helpful to have an organization or an individual who has developed grant applications before be able to support me in finalizing what all that looks like. And many thanks to Ella, we have a skeleton, but after the presentations last week, I think it, really hit home for me that there are so many considerations at play, and that we need to have all of those considerations discussed, developed, discussed again before we can confidently put out a grant. And especially with the fact we don't have an appeals process, it feels really important to me that all of these considerations, and this is just a starting list, that I have some support in developing that. And this is the first time we're doing it. It will not be perfect by any stretch, but I think hiring an organization or an individual to support the process of developing a grant is something that's in our control. and could help us move forward in the best way possible. And I think it would be pretty short term. We can also, we've talked about grant management sort of longer term, and I think that's a huge need for us. But I think right now what we need is someone to come in and really just help us with the language, the templates, the rubric of actually developing the grant application, and then we'll also have a better sense of what we need for ongoing support.
It is a short-term contract. It is not a long-term, it's not managing contracts. It's strictly in regards to the grant.
Can we direct source this?
That's what we're hoping.
Yes.
I would like us to hire, and you have to help us.
I have asked them, they do not have the bandwidth. Barry Dunn does.
Barry Dunn
And they are
does.
excited and can
I
do
also
it.
love Barry Dunn.
I talked to them about a couple costs too. We have to do a scope of work to make it official, but based on what I described to them and described to you all, seems like up to 25,000 and probably not even using all of that, they could confidently help us and start pretty soon.
Yeah, and I do just want to say that I've worked with Barry Dunn over the last 2 years, and they are phenomenal.
Yeah.
And if you want somebody that would catch fraud, they're the ones, because they are so good at their job, just saying.
And again, it just addresses the area of Mary and her workload. And part of what we want is, we want this funding to get where it needs to go. And if we have to do it on our own like we're doing it now, we're talking these grants won't get out within 6 months or so. We just can't do this anymore. And I know that it's money spent, I get it. But I think it's an investment that's wise. And if you didn't have a chance to see Barry Dunn's presentation, please go link on it. It was very well done, very professional. I think they could work, and no one's going to take the work away from the council. They're just helping us administratively move forward. Paul, you have a question?
I'm all for it, but I just want to know exactly what they would do.
And that we still need to develop that scope of work. It's something that I'm hoping the Program Grants Committee could finalize. And once we have that scope of work, Barry Dunn has said that they will look at it and let us know, again, sort of a ballpark of what they can do it for. But because we already have a pretty solid skeleton developed, they could do it for under 15,000 or up to 15,000. Yeah.
Do you need a motion with an amount attached to it?
I believe I need a motion with an organization and up to amount, and then we can start working together essentially.
Do you want this information or this proposal more detailed and solidified and vote on at the next meeting?
If I had my druthers, I'd like it voted on now, so Mary can immediately start negotiating with them. It's another 3 weeks from now. I just assume give Mary the opportunity to start that right away, to be able to negotiate with them.
See, Miles.
Miles, what you got?
I make a motion that we move to hire Barry Dunn for up to $25,000 to help us with this grant process.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Further discussion.
Miles finally got in there.
I think some of the work that we did in the finance committee could be helpful because we sort of outlined all the roles and responsibilities. I think we can literally highlight some of those sub-bullets there and say, this is what we want, this is what we want, this is what we want. So I think, and I would also, I don't know, we're going to add capacity and we're going to want to, I predict that we're going to want to continue that capacity. So we could just have another vote at the time and add money to the contract, I think, but I foresee that probably happening.
Yeah, and again, we're also going to have a conversation about grant management at some point in time, depending on how many grants we award. We're going to have to talk about that, but this scope of what we're asking today in this vote is really just to get us through the grant process. And then we will have more discussion in regards to contract management and how that moves forward.
Miles and Betsy, what was the work to hire Barry Dunn for up to 25,000 to help with, what was the actual
grant process?
That's what I wrote and then something else. Okay.
Any other discussion, comments? Gordon?
A lot of respect for Barry Dunn. They've been advising on a volunteer basis the work of our opioid data sharing committee. They're very big. I just left some of them at the Hospital Association this morning. I just want to, and Ben can help me here too a little bit, that it needs to be made clear that they work for us. We want to take full advantage of their expertise, but sometimes consultants can create their own scope creep. As Courtney says, I really respect these people. They're very, very good. All I'm saying is that it can become a little bit overwhelming when we've got one staff person and they've got 1,000 people around this country, if not around the world. So I just wanted to add that I'll certainly be supporting the motion. I think it's really the right thing to do. But don't let them decide what our scope is. We tell them what they do for us.
We got
Not a
Mary.
doubt in my mind.
I just want to make.
We're going to empower Mary.
I just want to make that
That's a good point, because again, it is, and again, I know that this council, I've had this for 1.5 years with everyone here, and I know you want to make your independent decisions. And so I get it. You don't want somebody else to make those decisions for you. They're here as consultants, they're here to teach, to help us, but they're not here to run ranshot over the work of this council. We know what our mission is and we know what we want. So, any other further discussion?
I just want to note that when they do help us develop it, I developed this and I talked to Tim and Zeb about it, that they would be working directly with me and that all of the considerations would come from the council through me to them. And they might join a program and grants committee or a full council meeting, but it will be presented by me.
What is that, Jeff?
Wow, some of us are elected officials.
What do we got here? I cannot read that.
Not substantive.
Wow. Elected official over here, Miles.
All right, any other discussion before we call a roll? If no other discussion, call a roll. Oh my Lord, we got it in. Okay, I'll call a roll.
Wow. Also not me, Miles?
Yeah, all right.
Liz Blackwell-Moore,
Yes.
Todd Brackett,
Yes.
Lydia Kraus, Joe Everett,
Yes.
Betsy Fitzgerald,
Yes.
Courtney Gary Allen,
Yes.
Pat Kimball,
Yes.
Ben Mann,
Yes.
Bruce Nodden. Oh, right, Miles Willett,
Yes.
Eric Small,
Yes.
Gordon Smith,
yes.
Keena Thacker, Chastity Toole,
Yes.
Paul Vinsel.
Yes.
That's 12 caps.
Motion carries. I thank you very much. And Mary thanks you, I'm sure.
Yes, truly. I have one more request for a motion.
10 minutes to spare.
So for the LOI evaluation, the reviewers will receive theoretically a Dropbox file with a passcode so that it stays secure. To do so, we need a Dropbox account, which for 15 users for all of you and the 16 for me would be $240 for a month for their smaller business plan, and I don't imagine we'll need it for longer.
Motion to approve Mary and others within the accounting firm.
Does the AG's office not already have one?
We have no rules in regards to spending, which is something we need to do. Because Mary should have some leeway into much, but right now we have no.
Wait, could I do a motion to allow Mary to make decisions under $1,000?
I prefer that go through finance. Yeah. I would, just so it's put in a policy.
Whatever.
Yeah.
It's a good try.
You can motion to allow it, but then also look into OneDrive.
So what's the motion?
I think there may be a free alternative to Dropbox that I'd like to look into more.
Can we vote on the motion and then if we get it free, it'll free, but.
Then we'll just ignore the motion?
Yeah.
Doesn't have a
second.
Okay, so the motion now is to allow Mary up to $300 to purchase a system. File sharing system to facilitate the council's work.
Second.
If necessary.
If necessary.
If necessary. Do you second that if necessary, Miles?
It was Eric, but yes.
Oh, Eric, okay, thank you. All right, so moved and seconded. Any further discussion on purchasing a drop box? If not, can you call a roll? Thank you, Haley.
Yes. Liz Blackwell-Moore,
Yes.
Todd Brackett,
Yes.
Lydia Crafts, Joe Everett,
Yes.
Betsy Fitzgerald,
Yes.
Courtney Gary Allen,
Yep.
Pat Kimball,
Yes.
Ben Mann,
Yes, I do think we could use the state system, so I'll follow up an email after this too.
sweet, Bruce Naughton. Oh, right, Miles Willett,
Yes.
Eric Small,
Yes.
Gordon Smith,
Yes.
Keita Thacker, Chastity Toole,
Yes.
Paul Vincent.
Yes.
Carries with 12.
And Ben, would it be possible to add to the next finance agenda to allow Mary to have a spending account that does not need things?
So then I would propose, I agree, but I would propose that the chair have that authority, not the coordinator.
Whoever.
Okay,
Thank you.
all right, so I can't believe this, we're actually,
Do you want to ask for other business?
other business. Is there other business?
Yes.
Good.
Just on the governance limited in your presentation, we do have another meeting before the event, so I'm not panicking, but I'm just wondering, if what the plan is today, who's participating, who's participating.
Right, so the plan, you must have been not here when I answered
Right, I
this.
came in 5 minutes.
So the plan is that I have asked everybody to please let me know who will be available. So how the program will go is, and I've spoken with Attorney General Fry on it. So Attorney General Fry will actually introduce us. Brendan will sort of update us on, and everybody in the room update where we are financially, where the settlement dollars are. Then Mary will do a sort of review of where the council has been and talk about the process of the letter of intent and the grant process. And then we will turn it over into a panel discussion where the members of the council will be there to answer questions from people in the audience. I have told, and it's my responsibility, I will get a PowerPoint out and cleaned up, and then people can review it before I send it on to AdCare to go through.
So, the Attorney General, Brendan, Mary,
Mary.
and yourself are doing.
Well, yeah, I will just facilitate the panel.
Moderate, oh, you're
Yeah.
moderating.
Yeah, I'm just gonna moderate the panel.
And then the rest of us are there in a supporting role, answer questions.
Mhm.
Great, wonderful. So
Unless anyone wants to add to that, that was the general plan.
I mean, I would subtract, I'm not sure I'm necessary, but
Well, people like to know about the money.
You know, and I just, right, and I would ask any of you that are going to go on to the site, register, check as a presenter.
Yes.
It's free if you're a presenter, and just check that box, and, because we do try to keep track of everybody.
You are on it, I believe we're on the agenda at 1:30.
It's the middle breakout session. We got over 600 people. We'll have 1,000 people there when we.
I think if you looked on there somewhere, it said how many people it are signed up. Liz?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that I feel like one thing that I'd love to see added to our presentations is the scale of the money we have versus the scale of the problem. I feel like there's this ongoing, I keep hearing it everywhere, like the funding we're getting for the Maine Recovery Council is going to solve all the problems. And I hear more and more people are telling me that they're getting funding. Their funders are saying, we're not going to fund you for that anymore. You should go to the Recovery Council, which I get if they take away the funding first and then tell you to go to the Recovery Council isn't supplantation. But in many ways, it's the spirit of supplanting, right? And so I feel like we need to just do a little baseline, bringing everybody up to speed that, you know, the state just got $227 million over 5 years for broadband. And this is 217 over 18 years for this enormous problem that costs $400 million a year in direct funds. I just feel like we could do a little bit of level setting for folks. I think would be helpful.
Liz, if you have particular numbers that you would like in there, would you please just send them to me?
Sure,
Or
yeah, I have it in that PowerPoint that I did for the prevention work group, and I can send that to
Oh,
you.
that was in there, yeah, if you, yeah, we can use that slide, yep.
I 100% agree. I think everybody thinks we are like bazillionaires over here at the
Oh,
Maine
yeah.
Recovery Council, and they're gonna be really let down in just a few weeks. And we need, because like the first 2 years, we were like, yay, look, like this new thing, which was important and real and valid, but now we're like, oh, like, it's not actually that money.
Well, and also, it's that, and I know all of you say it at least 1,000 times, it's not all here. And you can't spend money that isn't here. That it's over 18 to 20 years. And so we're trying our best to figure that out. We also have to be responsible. We are the fiscal stewards of these dollars, and it's important that you know that. And we can't overspend, and we have to be responsible. We can't just.
And I did just have a funder do that.
Yeah.
They were like, go check with the Maine, I was like, I am part of the Maine Recovery Council, guys, you can't tell me to go check with the Maine Recovery Council.
I'm not generally experienced that, Liz, but I can give you a slide, I can help Matt with a slide that puts this money in the context of all the money at the DHHS. This money does not exceed what we have every year in our block grants, our SOI grant, we just got a $3 million increase in the state opioid response grant, PDO grants, the OD2A grants, I mean, and to say nothing about all the increases in the supplemental budget for Maine care rates and things. So this, and to say nothing about the federal earmarks. The federal earmarks and the prevention treatment fund, there's private philanthropy. This is one thing. It's a very good thing to have. It's not the only thing. It's one of about 7 buckets of resources available in Maine to address the problem. That will take care of what you're saying. It will put our work in context.
Yeah, I like that. That makes sense.
I want both of those sides. I want Gordon's and I want yours, Liz.
Yeah, I just sent it to you, don't worry.
I want Brendan to finish
I
his
tend to
thought.
think about the scope of the problem differently from the scope of what's being spent.
Yes.
Like, I think those are different.
Yes, I don't disagree. I can do something on that too.
Yeah.
Okay, and total side note, Gordon, can you ask the ad care people to take off the time limit on the registering for the opiate summit? Because I got kicked out like 4 times and then I gave up.
Oh, yeah.
And then I sent it to Tess and she got kicked out like 6 times.
I'm not going to worry about it. I have not.
All right, so you had one more quick thing?
Just to follow up on our early discussion about the contract, to answer Todd's 2 questions. Yes, there's a liability insurance requirement in the contract, and yes, there's an indemnification clause in the contract.
But it's too late for me to change my vote, but I probably would have voted differently. That's okay. It's not your fault, I'm just.
It went through.
Can you make a motion to change your vote?
No.
But we don't have the answer yet about the state tort claims act.
I'm sorry, what?
We don't have the answer on the state tort claims act.
We don't.
Whether we're, as a body, we're.
Whether we should be.
Whether we are in it. I mean, it's not that easy to get in it. If we're not in it, but we'll find out whether we're in it.
Haley,
Yeah, I would like to
Haley,
not have my.
Haley's reminded me a couple of times that the bylaws require a public forum. We do have. The last public forum was last year.
Oh, okay.
Every year.
Do we need a
You know what,
motion to
we'll
adjourn?
probably plan it in the fall is my guess. We'll have a public forum in the fall. I'll put that on my little list. What are we
The
gonna
bylaws require us to
But
be
there
in
also
public
be-
forum, I just wanted to point that out.
I would wait until you get a new council.
do? Huh?
Wait until you get
That
a
would,
new council.
that only gives them like 5 weeks.
Like after the
Yeah.
first one of the year when.
Or we could change the bylaws so
But
that
we
we're 2
can
years
add it
into
to
public
our
forum.
agenda as to how we want to handle the public meeting as required.
That's fine.
And then have that discussion, because I want to get you out of here on time. It is 4:31. I totally appreciate all the conversations that were here today. I appreciate the work that you do, and as we move forward, we made some important decisions today. Please be careful in this heat. Watch out for coming storms that are coming our way. And we will see you all on the 11th, I believe.
Yeah.
We'll see you all July 11th.
Which is only 3 weeks away.
Which is only 3 weeks away.
Otherwise, our
Thank
next
you all,
item.
have a good evening. All right.